But anyway, let's get started. So, welcome to anyone who's new. I've noticed a few names in there that I don't recognise, so it might be that you're new, or maybe it's just the first time you said anything. So welcome everyone. This is just where we get to talk about anything. I imagine patch 7.3.5 will be first and foremost, but there may also be another announcement next week. I don't know, but you know, we get every week that goes past and Blizzard don't say anything about alpha or beta is another week closer to, well, surely they have to now. So maybe next week will be the week, or maybe Friday, because there's 3 potential days when they can announce something. So they can either announce something on Friday before they go home for the weekend, and that way the Twitter storm doesn't affect them because they don't have to look at it. They can announce something on Monday when they've just come back from the weekend and they want a whole week run up at it, which is potentially a good time to talk about a beta release. Or they can announce something like on Tuesday, not just because it's reset day in North America, but if they're going to do a live Q&A, they usually give a couple of days' notice. Or they sometimes give a couple of days' notice of that. And they usually do their live Q&As on a Thursday, if they do want to talk. So I would expect with 7.3.5 out-ish that they're going to announce a live Q&A at some point. Obviously not for this week, but maybe for next week. And maybe they will talk about the alpha and beta then. I mean, there's 3 things they can talk about. They can obviously talk about patch 7.3.5. They can talk about what's coming after 7.3.5. And they can talk about Battle for Azeroth beta or alpha or whatever they call it this time. I don't know what they're going to call it because that can vary. And yeah, so I was just actually explaining that the patch comes at a pretty bad time. It's a really weird one because everything sort of indicated it was going to be this week. Everything was sort of pointing at it. But one big thing that was missing was the fact that we got any warning. You know, we usually get like at least a week's warning. And Blizzard were just like, oh, by the way, patch is coming out in a few hours. Good luck. Hi, Kisasha. And the thing is, it's not like if the patch just added stuff and it wasn't affecting the raiding and stuff like that, you would just think, oh, that's fine, that's okay. But it has. You know, the fact that dungeon loot is personal loot now only. Leveling has significantly changed. The leveling changes are not from everyone's point of view improvements. I like the idea of the level scaling, the zone scaling, but it's not an advantage to everyone because it could arguably take longer to level using that. The legendary catch-up mechanic is too late. I'll talk about this last week. For me, it's too late. Now, I remember saying last week that I didn't think it was too little too late. I thought it was just the right thing, but it was too late. But now I do think it's too little too late because I think it's too expensive. I know, obviously, they've increased the amount of Waking Essence we get. But even given, like, I would say the typical profile of someone who needs legendaries, either they need it on their alt and they don't. Basically, it's on a character that they haven't been playing all of Legion. Now, okay, they could have re-rolled recently and they might do loads of content. All right, fair enough. I would say the profile of the majority of people who still need legendaries is someone who doesn't do a lot of the things that award legendaries. So, you know, doing a heroic dungeon a day, fair enough, they can do that. Doing a mythic plus, you get a load from your mythic cash, that's fine. Doing Antaurus LFR, say, as a minimum, that's okay too. I don't see that those people would, on top of all that, do a battleground every day. Maybe they would, maybe they do it every now and then, or do the other PvP stuff. So I don't. If you're not even going to get enough each week to get a legendary, I don't think it's enough. So I now do think it's too little too late. It's 1,000, yeah. They've massively increased the amount of essences you get. You know, it's not like on the old system because that would be ridiculous. But it's, yeah, I think doing a moderate amount, you know, a moderate amount of content that awards the essences should give you 1 a week. And if that meant it was possible for some people to get 2 a week, great, all power to them. So I just think for me, it's a bit petty. It's just a bit petty. I mean, the maddening thing about them increasing the amount it gives, the purpose of this was to stop people being able to... really, it was to stop people being able to stockpile it. Well, they only really... It was only revealed, this mechanic, in the last week or two anyway. So people wouldn't have had that long to stockpile. And even if they did stockpile, who the hell cares? If they were able to buy a couple of legendaries on the first day. I mean, seriously. It's just petty. So, but 175 in old money was still too much, I thought. I thought it was a bit too much. You know, maybe 150 would have been okay for me. But it was only a little bit too much. But, yeah, it's gone up to 1,000 now. And it's out of proportion as well. It's not that they're really increasing it by the same proportion as such. Oh, is it? Oh, we get time. Oh, do we get times 6 essences? I thought it was. I don't know. Let me think. Anyway, it's still too much. You can't get, even with the new system. Unless you do everything. I don't think you can get enough to get one a week, and that's what puts me off. And again, it was just stupid. It's not like we had months to save up. You know, people at most had a couple of weeks once we found out this was a thing to save up. You're only going to save up so much in those couple of weeks. It was just silly. It was absolutely silly. Oh, yeah, that's a good point as well, Fraser. So, yeah, for people who like farming transmog gear from dungeons, how will personal loot affect it? It will affect it a great deal, really, because there's certain items that you can transmog that will never appear because they're not on your loot table. So, for example... Let's talk about a really old dungeon where, I don't know, let's try and think of an example now. Okay, let's say you're a rogue, so you like your daggers. And then let's say what you want is you want to get a spellcaster's dagger for the transmog, which you can. You can transmog a spellcaster's dagger, but it won't be on your loot table as a rogue because it's not a melee agility dagger. So there's little things like that that are a little bit awkward. The personal loot change is forced, I believe. Yes. I think it's just straight up dungeons, personal loot. That's all there is to it. Much like it is in raids, remember. I mean, personal loot is forced on you in raids unless you're doing it in a guild group. If you're doing it with lots of people, which is sort of, I mean, was a good thing on balance because there's so many dodgy raid leaders making pugs that you can understand that. With dungeons, I don't see why that had to be forced. Because it was... Yeah, so... Now, I don't know... I can't speak for 100%. I don't want to sort of talk out of turn here. Because I haven't tried doing a dungeon solo on the PTR. So, is it the case that the personal loot applies if you're soloing a dungeon? It may not. But I haven't seen anything in the patch notes that suggests it isn't. But I really don't think it's an option. But anyway, what was when he's saying? Yeah, you get 970 a week if you do everything. But that's the problem. Like, I just see it as that we're... I'm just trying to think of the profile of someone who needs these things. And it's not someone who's going to do everything. There's a few people who will. Because re-rollers, they might be people who will do everything. Because, you know, they had all the legendaries on the previous main. They've changed mains. They're the sort of person who does everything. Okay, they're a really small minority of those people. The general profile is someone who's probably only from this system going to get one a month, and that just seems, I don't know, petty. Oh, it's not including battlegrounds. I thought that well then it's not 970 for everything then, because you get one if you you have to win a battleground every day. You can get some from winning a battleground, can't you? Personal was a huge improvement for pugs, though. Yeah, absolutely. So for raid pugs, definitely, personal loot was a good thing. It was absolutely a good thing. I know there are... I'm not saying it was... You know, there are certain... I mean, if you had a raid leader who was honest, then there was a lot of benefit in using master loot. Because, like, someone in a raid, for example, might get a piece of loot for personal loot that doesn't want, that can't be asked to give it away, so they just won't. Well, you had better distribution of loot with master loot, but by and large, there was more abuse. And people are generally okay. I mean, people who watch me stream, hold on, when was it? Yesterday, would have noticed me in LFR, because I had to do LFR on my Paladin for the mission cache. And there was a blood DK in it who was pissed me off something chronic. I really didn't like him. He tried to get me killed on some trash. And I didn't like his shenanigans on... which boss did we do just before? On Varimathras. But anyway. The fact of the matter was, I got some personal loot, which was some plate legs. And he whispered me to say, do you need them? Now, I would have given them him, but I sort of didn't want to. So I was just waiting a bit to see if anyone else would ask me. Sure enough, someone did. So I gave them to them instead. Which is a bit unfair. I should have just said roll for these. But, there it goes. Whereas with Master Loot, it would have just been a fair roll. And it wouldn't have just been me being an arsehole deciding who got it. Personal loot killed GDKP runs. Well, no, I don't care about those. But I did think it was a good system, forcing it. Because if it's one of those things, I always think, with freedom comes responsibility. If people aren't going to accept the responsibility that goes with it, it's obvious. It was also, I guess, too much of a headache for Blizzard, because the number of times people will sort of, I mean, they didn't help themselves out with their own systems, but if people, people obviously, whenever this happened, would then complain. And the only advice Blizzard would give was make sure it's in writing, as in someone's typed it into the raid chat, what the conditions for loot are. That way they can check over it. But here's the thing. Let's say you should have got the item, but the raid leader ninja'd it and gave it to someone else or themselves. All that Blizzard would do in that situation is take it off the person. They wouldn't give it to you. So, personal loot, yeah, is better. They may alter the requirements over time. Well, that, whenever they say they may do something in time, that's just them saying, be quiet. We'll see how it goes. Shut up. So they can change their mind on anything over time. They have changed their mind. There's some things that they've said in the past are really good ideas that they now say are really bad ideas, and vice versa. Things that they'd said, no, that would never work. They now go, oh, this is absolutely the future. What are the allied race requirements? So you need, for the particular race, you need Exalted with the faction attached to that race. You also need to have completed certain achievements. So for Nightborn, you need to have done the Suram. I can't remember the name of the Suramar achievement, but you need to have done one of, that involves a load of quest chains. Same thing for High Mountain. I remember the High Mountain one, though. It's there ain't no High Mountain high enough or something like that. Some crap. But you can't get them yet because although the infrastructure's in, you can't use them. I think what it's supposed to be is a pre-order bonus. So if you pre-order Battle for Azeroth, then you will get early access to them. But I don't know when the pre-order becomes available. It's not good Suramaritan. It isn't that one. It's a different one, but I can't remember which one it is. Hi, Pinky. But yeah, so for each of the allied races, you need Exalted plus a set of achievements attached to the zone that they're sort of to do with. Which means that Zandalar trolls, I guess you won't be able to do at all until Battle for Azeroth, because we can't even go to Zandalar at the moment. I can't remember what it is, whether it's Insurrection or what. I completely forget. Or is it Insurrection? Well, there we go then, so it's Insurrection. But yeah, so for each of them, there's that. There's two requirements, like a mini Lore Master type achievement and an Exalted with the rep. And yeah, and the fact that you've bought Battle for Azeroth, because although you can sort of get access to most of them, not all of them, Dark Iron Dwarves were not in the patch, so they haven't been put into the infrastructure of the game yet, so I don't know. The ones that are in are Lightforged Draenei, Void Elves, both of which need the same achievement and rep. Alliance get away with it, so you need the same achievement and rep for both of those. But High Mountain Tauren and Nightborn, you need different ones. Although ones that people have still probably got. Can I explain the patch notes? So, uncommon, rare and epic quality items now have the same potential item budget at every item level. Weapon melee white damage is now the same for uncommon, rare and epic weapons at all levels. Developers note this changes the power of lower item level weapons and armor to modern standards. All items above item 463. Right. What it basically means is the stats you get on an item are dependent upon its item level, not whether it's uncommon, rare or epic, is how I would read that. So it means that if you've got, say, this will be for the purposes of scaling loot. I'm sure that's what it'll be about, be the purpose of scaling loot. So if you get a 460 item level item, it'll have the same stat budget no matter whether it's like rare or epic. So that's what I would take from that. So people are saying the leveling will be more slow with the current changes on zones. Yes, it will. It will be slower. I don't know why that would be. I already have gone on record as saying many times that I think it already takes too long to level. It just takes too long. It doesn't need to take us. The concept of scaling should have allowed them to massively reduce the time it will take to level. Now, in terms of, I mean, we can't actually just say it's straight away. Hang on, Winnie, sorry. Item level 130 epic would have more stats than item level 130 green. Then, in that case, what do they mean? Because it says, if they're saying uncommon, rare and epic quality items now have the same potential item budget at every item level, that doesn't seem to quite match up with that to me. But anyway, sorry, going back. So, yeah, scaling, it should have been then made much easier to reduce the amount. Because you couldn't reduce the amount as things were before, because you'd be like finishing Westfall off and then having to sort of jump to Plaguelands or something. You're confusing me now, Winnie. They mean they'll have the same now. That's what I said, isn't it? That they would have the same now. Given what they've said. They've upped the... Okay, that's fine then. Okay, I thought... they've upped the XP needed per level. Okay. But you get more XP per quest because it scales. They should even out. It depends how you level, though. Different people level in different ways, don't they? So for people who level by questing, it could be argued that it'll work out about the same, maybe. For people who don't do so much of that, perhaps go into areas where they just beat up on mobs, then it will take longer. Because sometimes people just like to go to areas where mobs respawn like Billio and just murder a load of mobs and keep going around murdering loads of mobs, which is definitely dull to me. I'd rather just do the questing. But some people will do that because it's an efficient way to level. Well, it won't be now, I guess. It might also mean that the leveling through dungeons might be worse. I mean, it was always the case before this scaling anyway, that unless you were going into that dungeon for the first time, in other words, could do the quest, you were not going to get a massive amount of XP from it, but it would suggest to me that you're probably going to get even less. That is a good point, Kasasha. So made leveling take longer up to level 20, which makes going into a WoW trial seem like 120 levels would mean months of leveling. Yes, I'd not thought of that. That's a good point. Yeah, so if someone's doing the trial with the view of like thinking, oh, do I want to play this game full time? Yeah, they can say, okay, it took this time to get to 20. Yeah, and they can try and imagine, especially if they're familiar with RPGs and MMOs, they'll know that the first 20 levels are going to be the quickest 20 levels they'll ever do. Yeah, it actually could be a bad move. I don't think it would be a tactic to sell more boosts to 100 and 110. They're very expensive. They're the cost of an entire game. Like, for the cost of a level boost... I'm not saying level boost should be cheap, by the way, but for the cost of a level boost, you could actually buy a game for your, you know, console or PC. They've lowered the damage of low-level spells. Haven't they also nerfed heirlooms as well a bit? I don't know. I haven't checked enough stuff out on the PTR because it wasn't... Do you know what? It was one of my things to do this weekend because I really... Even though there was a lot of things pointing to this weekend, the fact that Blizzard hadn't said anything convinced me, okay, well, it can't be this weekend then. Or this week, sorry. So I thought I saw that heirlooms had been gimped a little bit. Yeah, not being able to one-shot mobs is a bit mean. Because... Unless, again, it depends what they've done with heirlooms. Because already the difference between having an heirloom, especially for the 1 to 60 content, I would say especially. But having heirlooms, the difference between having heirlooms and not... Because I've sometimes leveled for a laugh without heirlooms, just to see what it's like. The difference in damage is horrendous. So... Because another thing with this, just giving mobs more HP, for me, punishes new players more than, like, more experienced players. So, okay. I just see it as making it... Zone scaling, in theory, should have made it better for a new player. But... with everything else they put, I don't understand why they can't just put a good thing in the game. They always have to go. It's like there's a Buddhist running it now that has to have this concept of karma. Oh, we've put a good thing in the game. Now we must put many evils in it to balance it out. We must bring balance to the force because why would you? It's like with transmog. You know, they gave us transmog and then put a hideous number of restrictions in place, and then they gave the transmog tab and then put hideous restrictions in place. And now they're doing this. They're bringing the zone scaling in and now put a load of restrictions on leveling in place to make leveling take longer and to be harsher. And what the hell is the purpose behind that? And no one will ask them, you know, or no one that has to get an answer from them will ask them. Do I think the WoW trial was to blame for us not getting a real scaling, like all vanilla zones be 10 to 60? No, I don't think so. I don't see why that would have any great effect. There was no gameplay involved in one-shotting mobs, but you didn't always one-shot them. You one-shot them early on, but even with heirlooms, there came a point where you weren't. Okay, it didn't take that long. But you're not learning... You know, you learn most of stuff once you do group PvE anyway. Won't the fact that you don't one-shot everything create better players? Not if they can't be asked to get to level 120, no. It's going to make players that think sod this and go and do something else. You have to be a bit careful with this, oh, make the game more difficult and people become better. You have to make the game more difficult with escalation within different types of playing the game. So solo content should not be that bad. You know, I don't mind the concepts of being a bit careful about how many mobs you pull. If they reverted that, that would be okay. So you don't have people charging into a group of mobs and murdering them all. That's fine. But a one-on-one situation should not be like my experience of leveling. Originally, you know, how many years ago is it now? Jeez, can't remember. Don't like to think. But, you know, where I spent ages because I was a retribution paladin. Well, I was a paladin. There was no retribution about it when you're in the low levels. And I used to just auto-attack. I'd put a seal on and go... Brr, 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 until it died. No one wants that experience. Lowered the damage on mobs. You see, I'd have done it the other way around. I'd have quite happily increased the damage that the mobs do to you, but I certainly wouldn't have increased the health of them. Don't need to take any longer to kill them. But anyway, that's my opinion anyway. I just don't see the point in it. Unless, of course, they were to compensate that by massively reducing the amount of experience needed. For me, the key issue is the time it takes to level. You need there to be enough time to learn the basics of the class. You're not going to learn the finer points of the class while you're leveling anyway. That's going to come at endgame. So just get the basics. I mean, there's plenty of MMOs I play where I don't know the finer points of it. I've just, for the first time ever, I've got 2 characters now, but I've got a couple of characters to level cap on Star Wars The Old Republic. I don't know the finer points of that class. Don't care. Didn't learn it when I was leveling. If I start to do group stuff, then I would have to start paying a bit more attention. You know, same in any other game. Same in vanilla WoW. I didn't know the finer points of my class. I didn't even know about judgment as a paladin when I was at level cap. Know anything. Doesn't matter. You learn it then. Anyway. So from PTR play, leveling isn't super hard. It's 4 to 5 GCDs instead of 1. It's not how difficult it is that's the issue as such. It's how long it takes you. So if it takes 4 to 5 GCDs instead of 1, that means it's taking you 4 to 5 times longer. Simple as that. It's just taking you longer. It already took too long. Doesn't need to take any longer. Should be shorter. And zone scaling was an opportunity to make it shorter. Anyway, back to the first question that nobody seems to answer. Are dungeons also scaling level? Yes, they are. Dungeons are scaling. According to which zone they're in. They will scale the same as the zone they're in. But raids are not. The only scaling raid you're going to get is time walking. I've leveled characters recently. Well, I say recently, in the last couple of years. And, you know, even though... And actually, you can't move around a lot quicker. We can move around a lot quicker because we've discovered things. A new player doesn't get the same benefits that we do. Do I miss the old rep play style of stay out of combat and resurrect dead players? No, I didn't. I mean, that didn't last that long, for me personally anyway. But no, that wasn't. That was just ridiculous. It was retarded, that one. I mean, I didn't have to do it that much because usually took it in turns because no one liked to do it. What a rubbish job to do that was. I'm not saying playing Paladin was that much fun in raids before patch 1.9 in the first place. But, well, it was fun enough for me to want to do it. But yeah, just standing around on the outside rezzing people was ridiculous. Can basically run Ragefire Chasm from 15 to 60. I don't know about Ragefire Chasm because I don't know what that's classed as being in Orgrimmar. I would guess it scales all the way up to 60. And potentially could scale from 10 to 60. It might not even be 15. It might be 10. I don't know. A new player got lost in the current system, was doing grey quests because they had no idea what they were doing. The next system is more intuitive. I don't know. I think it's... People understand the concept that you're not getting much experience when the quest values start to get lower. And there were plenty of things pointing them to other areas. It was a very bad system. I'm not saying it's going to be worse with this system, but just the time it takes. It doesn't need to take as long as it takes. It's not even like the leveling content in WoW is enjoyable in itself. Like, talk about the other MMOs. Star Wars The Old Republic, the solo leveling content is actually enjoyable. Elder Scrolls Online, it's enjoyable in itself. You don't have to think about endgame because the actual content is enjoyable as well. It's not in WoW. It's crap. Like the 1 to 60 content is particularly terrible because it keeps going on about Deathwing and you never even meet him apart from that silly quest in Blasted Lands. All XP potions being removed from the game. I'd heard they were being removed from that Do For Him mop. I bet you can still buy them on the online store in China, though. Yeah, but that's the thing with ESO. You don't have to do the same quests because it's completely scaled. You can go and do a different path. And also with Elder Scrolls Online, you only have to get to level 50. And that was the level cap right at the start, because the secondary leveling system is account-wide. So as soon as you get a character to level 50, which doesn't take that long, then you get the same... Well, you've got the secondary leveling system is exactly the same. You hope scaling would just allow a player to be able to stick around in a zone and finish a quest line. Thought that was the whole point. That's one of the benefits of scaling. It's not the only benefit. Better story experience for those who want it, not a longer one for an experienced player who cares about endgame. It's not even just the more experienced one. I mean, a more experienced player, you could argue, might be more likely if they can't be asked to just to level boost. It's more the new player. And I know they get a level boost for one character, but it's not a good idea to use it for a new... I mean, you know... Because then that's... They're thrown in at the deep end then. Finishing off all the zone stories is a decent way to get Paragon levels. But, again, what I say is... You only get the benefit on one character. Once you've done a particular quest on one character, you've got those Paragon levels, the champion levels, whatever is what they're actually called in the game. You don't get the same ones for doing the same quest on the same character. So you're not encouraged to do the same quests on different characters. You can do. There's no harm in it. And there's still loot and stuff like that to come from it. But you're not getting the ranks if you're just repeating the same old stuff. But anyway, I mean, they've done what they've done. I just think it was annoying. I'd have just had complete scaling, and I'd have used it as an opportunity to make the leveling shorter. Not short, you know, it should still take, I would say, a decent amount of time. You need to be able to learn the basic spells you've got, and you need to be introduced to the world. And again, the 1 to 60 content doesn't help that either. The 1 to 60 content used to be really good. It would introduce you to lots of things. It would introduce you to the concept of dragons and old gods and elemental lords and titans and the different races and all the rest of it. But now they don't. Hang on a minute. If gnomes aren't supposed to be paladins, which they're not, Ian Hazakostas himself has said, doesn't make sense. How come there's a gnome paladin Hearthstone card? I suspect you're trolling me, but on the off chance that you are not, when did this abomination appear? And did it coincide with Celestalon's scurrying to them? Because I would just blame him if there was such a thing. Does this gnome have blue hair? I've never seen, so I'm going to look this up because I think you're trolling me, actually. I can't see anything in Google Images about a gnome paladin. You're making it up. No, I can't see anything. I've Googled it. I can see nothing. I can see Bolvar 4 dragon. He's not a gnome. I can see a few other things. They're also not gnomes. So no. I'm afraid you must be making it up. It doesn't exist. And if it does exist, it exists in Hearthstone, which has got nothing to do with it. Ian Hazakostas has no... Oh, crap. Have I got to look it up? Chillblade Champion. Let's have a look then. I have to say that sounds more like a Death Knight, though. That's a Death Knight. What are you playing at? I knew you were taking the piss. Oh, dear. So there you go. It doesn't even exist in Hearthstone. It's, how look, right. It's not. Listen. It's got an ability on it called Charge Lifesteal. It's in Death Knight armor and it's carrying Frostmourne. How much less like a Paladin can you be? Hang on. No. Look, it's perfectly simple. Look, that is a Death Knight. Look, it's got Frostmourne. Hang on, where's my pointer? Frostmourne, not the Ashbringer. What? Hang on, oh, it's messing about. Come here, Gnome. So it doesn't have the Ashbringer. It's got Frostmourne. It's got Death Knight armor. It's got a purpley background, which is very Death Knight colour. It's not pink. Charge Lifesteal is not Paladin. Nothing about that is Paladin. A Death Knight. No, a Death Knight is not just a raised Paladin. Some raised Paladins are Death Knights. Or some Death Knights are raised Paladins. The original Death Knights were orcs. You know, Shadow Council members, really. Or, I suppose, the souls of them placed into dead Stormwind guards. So... No, Gnome is banned word. You're breaking the rules even by trying to circumvent it, but still. It's not cute, right? There's nothing cute about it. Where's it going? I need to delete it now. So, no. So that's clearly a Death Knight. I knew it couldn't be true. Murloc Paladins I'm sort of okay with, but I would also have to accept that they don't make sense either. Well, what would I rather replace Gnomes with? It's interesting you should say that. You know, we should have had goblins, really. That was actually, I think, supposed to be a thing. You know, the Alliance were going to get goblins originally. And then someone thought, no, we'll give them gnomes instead, for whatever reason. I don't even know what the reason was, because they weren't even really a significant part of Warcraft 1, 2, or 3. I don't think they were even gnome units. You know, I think they sort of existed, sort of, but they weren't. You didn't have gnomes in any of the games. Pandas would be awesome, actually, because pandas have the best two-handed weapon stance in the game. So that would actually be pretty good. It sort of looks a little bit like the male blood elf, only with some dignity. So yeah, I would quite like panda paladins. Pandaladins. So that would be fine. I'd have no problem with that. But yeah, I mean, gnomes shouldn't have been in the game in the first place. I think the only reason they were is because there were 4 obvious Horde races to put in, but there were not 4 obvious Alliance races. So they had to, I think the situation was that there had to be a 4th, and it was going to be goblins, and then some fool said, no, let's make it gnomes instead. The flying machines had gnome pilots. I don't recall that. I recall having dwarf gyrocopters. I'm not saying there weren't some gnomes in gyrocopters. Why shouldn't Nelf have been Alliance? Given that there were going to be 2 factions. Now, I sort of agree it would have been better had there been 3 factions, because for PvP purposes, 3 factions is always better. So they could have had elves and different types of elves, and they could have had Alliance and Horde, and that would have worked. That would have been okay. But given that they were going to have 2 factions, Nels had to be Alliance, really. I mean, I still don't I still, it escapes me completely, you know, why you would ever go for a 2-faction system anyway. Because it always causes problems. The only thing that sort of stopped it becoming a massive problem in WoW is because WoW isn't really a PvP game. In which case it's extra annoying that they have to have this faction stuff. No, it wasn't Alliance in the original Warcraft games, indeed. They were their own faction, yeah. But as I say, given that they were going to have 2 factions, you couldn't just not have Night Elves in it. And if you were going to have them in it, they had to be Alliance. They don't like orcs at all. Whereas they're relatively indifferent towards humans and dwarfs. Not sure why they made Nightborn Horde and... Well, the reason for that is because of Void Elves. Void Elves had to be Alliance. There is no two ways about it. Nothing else would have made sense. Because Illyria is the one who has to train the Void Elves. And Illyria is super anti-Horde. She hates the Horde. Proper hates them. So there is no way that she would soften her stance there. So if Alliance were going to get Void Elves, Horde had to get Nightborn. Now the story reason for the Nightborn, of course, is that Doofa, Lady Liadrin, was very, you know, had a lot in common with Elishra, is it? The first Arcanist, Thalishra, something like that. Can't remember her name. The crack addict in Suramar. And so, you know, she persuaded them to go Horde. But yeah, the Void Elves had to be Alliance. Sorry, there's no way they could be Horde. The only storyline way of making any Void Elves Horde is for them initially to be Alliance or to be trained by Illyria at least, and then to move away from her and go to the Horde. But she would not knowingly train Horde like sympathizers. You know, that's not happening. Dark Iron Zandalar. Well, Dark Iron have been part of the storyline for forever. Zandalar is part of the storyline on Battle for Azeroth because the Horde go to Zandalar during Battle for Azeroth. So their leveling zones are on Zandalar. So yes, the Zandalari trolls will have that link there. Whatever you main in BFA, it's going to be Void Elf. See, that's the thing when you're asking, or someone was asking earlier, if I'm going to level a new character. I was sort of saying, well, yes, I sort of will. It may not be straight away though, because I'd also, if I'm going to do it at all, I don't know. I ought to level an allied race. I don't know what I would level. It wouldn't be a knight. I don't like the Nightborn. The ones I quite like the look of are the Zandalar trolls. They're sort of okay. As far as trolls go, I'm not a huge fan of trolls in general. But, you know, at least these ones can move around without scraping their arse on the floor. The Void Elves are okay. And the Dark Iron Dwarfs are okay. So it'd be one of those three, I guess. But you know, we can't get them until the pre-order. It's going to be a pre-order Battle for Azeroth thing. I don't know when the pre-order. I don't see that it makes sense for the pre-order to be made available soon. At the same time, I don't see that it made sense to put the infrastructure in this patch. I don't get what that was about. So I don't know. Dark Iron Dwarf Paladins. Well, my initial instinct was no. Unfortunately, I did have to reconsider when people were pointing out that you have Dark Iron Dwarves in Blackrock Depths that use a number of Paladin abilities, including Bubble. So, yeah, I don't quite agree that they should be a thing, but it's very difficult to argue against it. You're going to change to High Mountain Ret. That's just... why? You're learning nothing from my channel, are you? Nothing at all. There are also troll paladins in, well, Throne of Thunder, yeah, source, ones that use holy magic anyway. I'm not sure you'd call them paladins. But that is a reason why people were wanting Zandalar trolls to be a paladin choice for Horde, because of the, because one of their racials, isn't it like an ability that does some holy damage or something? Wowpedia states that Paladin is the only known class for Dark Iron Dwarves. The reason for that is because Dark Iron Dwarves haven't been put into the game files yet, so there's nothing to data mine on them. And apparently, although I missed it, Ian Hazacostas mentioned that Dark Iron Dwarves could be Paladins at BlizzCon. So I'm told. I can't remember him saying that, but several people have told me, so I believe it. So that's why that is probably there. Because the other 4 have been in the game. We've been data mining stuff on the other 4. But Zandalari Trolls are not in the game files yet. And neither are Dark Iron Dwarfs. There's no such thing as blood magic as such. In terms of the actual schools of magic. As noted in the Warcraft... what's it called? Warcraft Chronicles. Can't remember the name of the book then. So in the type and the schools of magic, blood isn't there, death is. So but yeah, so there is the potential. There are vampires in Warcraft lore, yes. I mean, we fought against some of them. Oh yes, I saw that thing about the theme hospital on Twitter. Yeah, anything to do with Shadow has got no business being linked with a paladin. Because here's the thing, like it keeps being, well, in the new law, shall we say, the new law, that light and shadow are supposed to go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, so to speak. But you can. There are some exceptions. So obviously old gods are beings of the void and Naru are beings of the light. And paladins are, even though as humans or dwarfs or blood elves or whatever the creatures are, will be a combination of the two, they are supposed to dedicate themselves entirely to the light. They shouldn't be having anything to do with the shadow. Not a thing. So there's so anything that has any links with shadow shouldn't be a paladin. What would be the shadow version of a paladin? A death knight. They cast plenty of shadow magic. They don't really cast holy magic at all. I mean, they do like nature damage as well, but there's a fair amount of frost, but there's a fair amount of shadow damage done there. I mean, that literally, that's what I thought the first time I saw any gameplay footage of Death Knights before Wrath came out. I thought that's what they were, the anti-paladin, you know, because they just showed off lots of shadow stuff. Not necessarily, well, but they still cast shadow damage. Shadow is like a pure form of magic, just like light is. Or holy. Night elves as paladins. I'm not wholly keen on the concept. But I'm not totally opposed to it. The thing with the night elf paladins, of course, is there's now precedent. Because they've basically made one a paladin. And also, there is still, like, my main objection to it is on shaky ground. My main objection is that all night elves worship a loon. But we don't really know who a loon is. So if a loon turns out to be a being of the light, then that means that, you know, night elf paladins absolutely would make sense. I haven't played any Pathfinder, I don't even know what it is. All I know about Pathfinder is the German is Pfadfinder, which is a 14-year-old boy I found hilarious. We only have 2 followers. Well, the problem with the other follower is he's dead. I don't think that Paladins should really have, I don't think there should be ghost Paladins. But yes, he is a night elf, but he's a night elf and he's dead. Although making him dead doesn't make him the most useless of my followers. Very few of my followers are actually Paladins. That's quite depressing. To me, if a class can be a Paladin and a Priest, there's no reason they can't also be Paladins. I don't think that makes sense. I don't think you meant that. A warrior. There is an argument to be made there. The problem is that argument would also allow Gnome Paladins, and we obviously know that can't happen. The other thing about priests is that there are shadow priests. Now, there could never be shadow Paladins. So, no. No. Well, you could have fallen Paladins in Dungeons and Dragons. But it was a bit careless to make one of those. Because there wasn't really any benefits to it. You just lost a load of abilities. Seeing this in a previous video, it reminded me so much of the Paragon class in Guild Wars. Reckon a Paladin ranged DPS spec. Yes, I think Paladin should have... I think all melee should have a ranged DPS spec if it seems feasible to do it. I could imagine Paladins having a... Because there's too many melee. It's just... I cannot put it any more straightforward than that. Like, take Coven, for example. My guild progressing on Coven. Unfortunately, we haven't killed it. But basically, what I said was there... I completely volunteered to be sacked because I thought my only real use on that fight, and you can get away with some melee, sure, but we've got loads. My only real use is tanking one of the bosses. If I had a ranged DPS spec, I would absolutely go that. So Shockadin should be one for that. Someone was talking about last week, it put the idea into my head, an axe throwing class. Well, that could be a warrior. You could have a ranged DPS spec for a warrior, which chucks axes. You know, a throwing weapon-based style of combat. You know, so for rogues as well, you could have like a, I mean, they've taken enough ideas off Diablo. Why don't we go with it? You know, the Demon Hunter thing with the twin crossbows, the mini crossbows. You could do that as a rogue range DPS spec. So you could come up with DPS specs for most, if not all, of the melee. And that would completely alleviate... I should do a video on this. That would completely alleviate the problems with this melee ranged balance that Blizzard seem incapable of managing. Your guild is 80% range. That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. I've never heard of such a beast. You don't need melee specs for the ranged classes. You need ranged specs for the melee classes. Outlaw makes you think about pistols, not swords. Well, yeah, that's possibly true. The problem with pistols, the notion of an actual pistol, is it doesn't have a huge rate of fire. So, probably the all right, a crossbow shouldn't have a huge rate of fire either. But, you know, they've done it in Diablo. You can sort of... You can buy that, the idea of having a cartridge on it. So, yeah, no, I can see ways to give ranged specs to the current DPS. Like, Death Knights, I thought was going to have a ranged spec. Like I was talking about when I saw the first footage, I thought it was ranged. I thought the Death Knight was casting at range. You know, you had Death Core and Death and Decay and sending minions in. So it was very much, you know, like being a Demonology Warlock, mostly. Or as it used to be at any rate. So, you know... You're running into the issue of barely having any Vank DPS. That's... Oh my god. You've got a freakish guild as well. You've got hardly any Vank DPS. It's protectors. Like, I was really annoyed this week. I don't think I was the only one. So, on Imanar, for example, we killed Imanar. I really want the tier legs. As soon as I get the mythic tier legs from Imanar, I can actually start to sensibly work towards getting my 4 set tier 21 and actually start to get much better. My gear, for all its item level, which is not that far behind now, or it's not great, depends on what trinkets I use actually, if I'm honest, nonetheless is it's poorly itemized. It's very poorly itemized, and I'm now feeling that I'm getting behind in terms of my DPS, and that is the trigger for me. Just getting those legs allows me other options with other stuff I can equip, but they're not dropping them. And it dropped protector tokens this week, and that's all it dropped. And then we killed Kingaroth for the first time, and that dropped protector tokens. And if Varimathras was a token boss, I bet that would have dropped protector tokens as well. It's not just the tier 21 that's poorly itemized for me. I mean, my character is poorly itemized. So, but yeah, I've never heard of, I don't think there's too many guilds where most of their DPS is ranged, and another guild where you don't have many Vanquisher users. Because Vanquishers is things like Druids, Mages, you know, I mean, Rogues as well when it comes to that, which are the things you want lots of. Your tier balance is 7 Conqueror, 3 Vanquisher, 8 Prot. Ugh. I don't think anyone used Prot. Prot classes don't exist. I mean, what have you got? You've got Shaman, Hunters, Warriors. Actually, did Demon Hunters become Prot? No, they're Conqueror. What else is Prot? Can't believe remember now. Oh, Monks, I suppose. So some of the least represented classes in the game. Feels like Blizzard tried to stealth nerf certain classes via poor tier 21 set bonus itemization. I'm not sure that's the case, because apart from anything else, Blizzard don't accept that there's any difference between the secondary stats in terms of power. Or at least that's their public line anyway. You know. Three Shamans, 4 Hunters, and a Monk. 4 Hunters. Dear me. But anyway, it's that's all we had drop. We had 2 Prot legs drop and then 2 Prot gloves. So good night for the very few Prots that we had. Yeah, well, that's everywhere you go. There's tons of Hunters and Shamans. Heroic Raiders tend to love male. Do you know what? We keep, whenever we don't get that many BOEs dropping Mythic and Taurus, but when we do, I'm not kidding, they are always male. They're just male every time. No one ever needs them. I imagine the guild bank's doing quite well. Every new hero, well, it's not just hero, it's just every new class they've added. Not all of them have been classed as hero classes. In fact, I think technically only DKs were. But at the moment, I don't know what we're discussing. I suppose we're going back to range. We were talking about ranged and melee, and giving ranged specs to melee DPS. But yeah, as Haggis just said there, I mean, that is the other issue. There were already... See, it didn't used to be a problem with melee balance in vanilla because your melee DPS was basically rogues and maybe a Fury Warrior. That was essentially it. The odd guild allowed a Paladin to not go on blessing duty and they could DPS fine. But that was generally not the case. I don't think many guilds had multiple DPS warriors. Like our guild had 1. I knew plenty of guilds that had none at all because a lot of people didn't think warriors could do DPS. But Fury could do a lot of DPS if you knew what you were doing. Most warrior DPS was essentially a protection warrior doing something when they weren't tanking, which is not very much. So then you had TBC, which allowed where they put some effort into making every spec viable, which then flooded the market with melee. So now all of a sudden you had warriors, paladins, shamans. You know, you could have enhancement shamans, even though they were far more likely to be elemental, I think. We might, as far as I can remember anyway. But still, enhancement shamans are still a thing. They could use two-handed weapons as well. It was weird. I remember leveling enhancement a little bit with the two-handed. Rogues, feral druids. You know, you could have kitty. Well, there were feral kitty and bear, but you'd have feral kitty. Could do DPS as well. So you all of a sudden had, you know, melee. And then, yeah, in Wrath, then you introduced Death Knights into it without a ranged spec. And then in Mop, you had monks, melee, without a ranged spec. And now we've got Demon Hunters, melee, without a ranged spec. All of whom could have been given a ranged spec, and none of whom were. Whereas, you know, so the fact that there were certain disadvantages to being in melee originally wasn't a big deal. Now it is. So, and I just don't know where the thinking goes with that. It should be identified as a serious problem. You know, if I was in charge, I'd be saying to someone, right, this is your problem to solve. Like, they must have problems to solve. Every year at my work, you're given some tasks to do. Like, you have an appraisal at the start of the year, and they say, right, this year I want you to do these things. These are your special projects. And that's what you do. And they should just give that. You know, they should identify key problems. So, right, your special project is dealing with the melee range balance. Come to me with ideas in 2 months' time. And feasibility studies and whatever else is needed. That is your special project. But anyway, it's not. They don't do that. How would I go about a ranged DPS spec? By doing what I thought they were doing. There is nothing to stop you being able to have spells that apply diseases at range. Death and Decay can be placed at range for AoE. You can have minions. You can send ads, control ads. And you've got Death Coil. You've got plenty of abilities that could have just been made ranged. And it could still work the same way. You could basically have Unholy Death Knight as it is now. But instead of those abilities being melee, they could be ranged. You know, but you could still have essentially the same abilities. All they can do is make melee have to do the most mechanics. Well, there's some mechanics that's not sensible to get melee to do, because then you lose out on too much damage. So then you take the bare minimum of them to do that. The only thing that melee are good at is an interrupt rotation. And the only reason that they're good for that is not because they're melee. It's because all melee have an interrupt on a maximum of 15 seconds cooldown. Whereas range tend to have it on a much longer cooldown. Like the Shadow Archer, I would go more for Demon Hunter range spec. You know, like a Ranger type spec for them. So to be Fel rather than Shadow, I suppose. You're wondering if you'll ever see a spec cut from the game. I'm not sure. If I was to cut one from the game, I would actually plan to not allow any class to have more than 2 DPS specs. I would instantly cut them from the pure DPS specs. Range DK would obviously be the Necro. It could be, indeed. It could be Necromancy, yeah. Something very similar to it. In fact, when I was in beta, I don't know when it was in, but it was certainly some time before it launched. There was a point where Raise Dead for a DK, you could use it on a fallen comrade, but instead of just being a battle res, it turned them into a ghoul. So they could play as a ghoul, really. Wasn't as good. But they put pay to that. That was obviously one of their mad ideas that never... Because in those days, mad ideas didn't get to go to launch. Whereas these days, that whatever the break was on that system then doesn't exist anymore. What about 2 range specs and 1 melee spec? No, the reason why I would get rid of them is not because I think it's silly just to have 3 range specs or 3 melee specs or something like that for the same class. It's just because there's too many specs for them to balance. It would be a lot easier for them to bring balance and stop focusing on this must-have unique abilities thing if they were just... Because it's quite clear, even though they keep talking about classes having unique things, it's pretty clear that's not what they mean. What they mean is specs. Because if it was just classes they were bothered about, what's the harm in giving me something like Blessing of Sacrifice or Devotion Aura? But they don't, because they see those as holy paladin things. I mean, they could get rid of Mark. In terms of Hunter, you might as well leave Survive, because if they did decide to give range specs to melee classes, then you don't have such an issue with a Hunter being melee. So I would actually get rid of Marksmanship Hunter and take that gameplay style to Demon Hunters and have Demon Hunters as a Dark Ranger choice, a spec, as their range spec, which can work pretty much as Marksmanship Hunter works now. Oh, do you know what? I'm working something out here. I'm going to do something on this. I'm going to do something on this because I quite like this. It'll never happen, obviously, but still. Back in the day, some of the pure DPS had specs. Well, mainly viable in PvP only. The thing is, back in the day, specs were a bit different now. You didn't choose. Like, you know, you weren't, for example, as Ret, Prot, Holy, or Ret. You were just... Which one you were was just which one had the most talent points. You just picked talent points. And if you had most of them in Ret, you were a Ret Paladin. If you had most of them in Holy, you were a Holy Paladin. You didn't choose one with a single button. It was just how many talent points you assigned to each tree. And you would, in all likelihood, assign some talent points to each of the trees. So obviously then, abilities had to be per class and not per spec. Because there was no such thing as a spec, really, other than where you put your talent points. For locks, it makes sense to have one dot spec, one pet spec, and one caster fire spec. No, it doesn't. You don't have to have that at all. In fact, it could be argued that having multi-dot classes at all is what's causing problems every now and then. Because the issue is that when you have a fight, like Coven at the moment, where there's loads of stuff up at any one time, especially when it's spread out, then multi-dot classes go mental. So then the problem is, where do you pitch it? Do you nerf them? Well, then the problem is, what if it's only one boss? That makes them weaker. Or do you just allow them to be godlike on those fights? Well, that's just silly. Because then that means a guild that has several of them is going to do really well on that fight. And a guild that doesn't have any of them is going to struggle. So, you know, having multi-dotting is sometimes almost as much of a problem as having anti-melee or anti-range when it comes to it, but mostly anti-melee fights. You want to do survival when you bring back your vanilla hunter. You've got 4 hunter legendary tokens sitting in your Paladins bank at the moment. Oh, well, I haven't. I still haven't even got all my Paladin legendary ones. I for some time, have not been doing a lot of the content that gives them. I mean, I've been in raiding, obviously, but that's pretty much it. And the free legendary follower equipment up on the Broken Shore. The problem is it's trash now. Those legendary follower items are worse than some of the greens that you can get from Argus now. The Argus champion gear is so much better than anything that came before it. Do I think I'll get invited to any groups as a survival hunter? Yeah. Survival hunters are really good if played properly. You know, I've seen them played very well. Oh, you can still get the 50 gold and 100 resources, yeah. Well, the thing with that is, I've even stopped taking, because one of my champions does have the thing for the extra AP. I've even stopped taking them because it just clogs my bags up. My bags have very little space. Admittedly, it should have 4 spaces more by tomorrow. But again, the patch still isn't downloading for me. It's like, why? What? Not good. Not good. Nerf all dots, give dot specs a type that increases dot damage if they are applied on one target only. The problem, again, is you'll never get the balance right. So you get a fight, for example, where there's 2 bosses. So do you tune it so it works out about the same if there's 2 bosses up? Then that's no good. They'll just go single target, a little bit of an incentive to do it on 2, so you make it a little bit better. Because it is harder. You're actually, you know, there's an increased skill in maintaining dots on multiple targets. It's what you pitch it at. So, like, you might look at a 3 boss council fight and maybe it works out a bit of a benefit then. Well, then if you have a 4 boss council fight, much like Coven Mythic, then, well, I suppose it's 3 at one time, isn't it? Don't know. But if you've got more up, then it makes them more powerful. I just think they just get rid of, well, I mean, they're not going to get rid of multi-dotting, so. Even if it's not very big, my issue is tomorrow I will get home just in time, literally just in time, to fire up my computer and, you know, load everything up and get myself online just as we're about to go into the raid, because, you know, I am due to finish work half an hour before the raid tomorrow. Now, it doesn't take that long to get home, although there is some traffic, but it will give me about, I'll probably get home with about 10 minutes to go before the raid. And this will be 5 minutes after invites have started. So, precious, even a minute wasted downloading a patch. And the problem is, I've seen people have issues with the patch. That's the problem. There's been reports of people having issues with it and not being able to get realmless. And the blue responses have not suggested that it's just down to them. They have indicated that it's a thing, which is not good news. No, I don't take time off. That's a form of theft. Pulling sickies. Also, I've got students. They don't need to be missing any more lessons. I actually thought I was maybe getting ill on Sunday, actually. I woke up, a little bit of a sniffle. I thought, oh no. Because it usually happens on Sunday for some reason. I don't know why. Most of my illnesses happen on, like, they'll start off with me just feeling a bit under the weather on Sunday morning. And by the time it's got to Sunday evening, I'll just have full-blown flu. But no, I'm still getting away with it, it seems. So I'm doing okay this year. But it's the fact that I've seen reports of people downloading the patch on the EU that makes me wonder why it isn't doing it for me. I mean, it was already going to be tight, getting myself online and everything. And I wouldn't... Oh, yeah. Because I've got to collect my coins as well. That's another thing. Actually, do I? I've got 2 coins already. I might be able to get away without it. Or I might just pick up 1 coin or something. That should last me for tomorrow. And I've got to grab my cat. I have to position myself next to the NPC that gives me my free token seal, and then grab the chest on the way out. I need to empty my bags a little bit tonight, actually, before I go to bed. Get myself all ready. I've got my potion. I've done my consumables, so that's all fine. NA players, yeah. I don't know if there's... I don't know if the maintenance... I imagine the maintenance lasted a little bit longer. But if it's all up and working now, then that's okay. Oh, the servers are still down. Oh, well, there you go. So, It is taking a while then. Because they would normally be up by now, wouldn't they? Do I think they should have removed class restriction for combat resin with the new changes to dungeon? Just a generic mythic plus and raid spell that grants combat res capabilities. There is merit in that line of thought. I'm not saying they necessarily should. There is some merit in the concept that in a dungeon, obviously you can only take 5, and you will always have some classes, because of some utility in all likelihood, that's more desirable than others. And obviously, even with the restrictions to battle resin now, you still get a benefit from taking classes that can battle res, because it's not like you would just think, oh, well, we might as well only take one druid or something, because what if that's the one who gets killed? Well, your battle res doesn't help you then. So there is some argument then, but then the next inevitable step would be, well, should everyone get heroism and other, should everyone get an AoE stun? All the sorts of things that are considered useful enough utility that you'd rather take someone who played a class who had those than one who didn't, is probably, so, and certainly their concept of completely new unique abilities for classes wouldn't stand up to that either. Hopefully the patch tomorrow will take all day. Oh yeah, where I am, I don't think the snow will come in heavily. It's forecast to snow tonight, but it's also been raining as well. Whereas the weather tomorrow looks okay. It's where I am, it's supposed to be, there's yellow alerts for wind the next 2 days, but not snow or anything. So I think it's just going to be one of those. I think it'll be fine tomorrow. My main concern would be a bit of ice if it's going to be really cold. But I don't have the opportunity to work from home. I need to win the lottery. Or somehow get 10 times as many views. Cold in Minnesota. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you put your you put your units in there, because I was just about to say America's use Fahrenheit, don't they? I think they're pretty much the only ones who do now. But, I mean, we were talking about this in my class actually today, because where I am, my students just go, if they see some snow, which they did today, they just go mad. And I try to explain to my students, in Scunthorpe, which is where we are, you've probably seen proper snow 3 times in your life. It's really not a thing very often at all. Then, I'm not showing them my cleavage. Then, what is there now? So yeah, we don't. Whereas in country, you sometimes get taken the piss out of, because when the snow does come down, it basically scuppers you. You can't go to work, and people in other countries that, or parts of countries that have it a lot, will take the piss out of it. But it's because we don't have it very often, so we're not equipped to deal with it. We're not experienced to deal with it. Like my main issue with snow. We were talking about this today, if it came in. My mission of snow is not getting stuck and not being able to travel. My main issue is it's not so bad that you can't travel, but it's bad enough to be a bit dodgy. Because I don't need, I don't need to be crashing my car into things. Any related news from the Warcraft movie? Yeah, there's not going to be one. I saw a tweet. I was going to do a video on it and I completely forgot. There was a tweet from Duncan Jones, who was the director of it. I follow him because he frequently gets people praising him for it. He'll retweet it. And he was, very much hoping for a sequel, of course. He'd very much planned on it. But the tweet I saw a few weeks ago from him, was basically suggesting that there's no plans for it. And to be fair, it made a loss. So you're not really going to get someone going for a sequel. The same studio certainly is not going to. Why would you... why would you fund a sequel to a film that didn't make a profit? So it's disappointing, but that's reality. But oh, in Ireland, yeah. Well, where I am, I'm sort of on the east, so we've got the Pennines, which is like a ridge of hills that protects us. So when my sister, ironically, she's on the west, she's in the Lake District, so she's on the west of where I am. It's almost directly west, maybe a bit further north. She gets pretty bad weather. I mean, she's not that far from Ireland and Scotland, really. So she'll get it pretty bad. But we don't. Where I am, we just don't. We're quite nicely shielded from it all. It made enough money in China, but not. The film hasn't made a profit. In terms of what the studio laid out, the money it made international, because the thing that was pointed out, it was thought when it first came out that it would easily make a profit just from the China sales, and it didn't actually do badly in Europe either. It was only North America where it did badly. It didn't do great in Europe. The problem, yeah, that 433. No, Kisashi, this is where you're mixing it up. It didn't make $433 million. That's what it took in. That's the ticket sales. Not all of that money goes to the studio. You know, the cinemas need paying, the distributors need paying, all the other people need paying. So the studio got less than 160 million back. That's the problem. You can't compare ticket sales with original production costs because there's other people involved that take their cut. Obviously, can't expect cinemas to work for free. But the problem was because the problem was I couldn't understand why it didn't do very well. Right? Okay, I can understand why it wasn't a huge blockbuster, but I couldn't work out why it didn't do well enough. And I kept reading things, and most of the things I read were just they weren't objective at all. So I wasn't getting any information there. The only objective piece that made sense that I thought about the orcs thing because that was the only thing. But Forbes wrote an article on it which actually made sense and was objective, and I thought, yeah, that's probably it. So what they noticed after the dust had settled was that in every territory, that includes China, where it actually took a decent amount of money. So China, Europe, North America, all the rest of it. It made its money in the first week or two. It's all front loaded. So what that basically means is that the people who went to see it were the ones who wanted to go and see it. And word didn't get around that it was a great film to entice other people to see it. So what you normally see with a really big film is you'll get a load of people sure wanting to watch it on opening week, but then it still continues to make money after that. Whereas Warcraft didn't. You know, it basically made its money in the first week or so, and then very quickly plummeted. A lot of CG in a movie tends to turn people off it. I thought the CGI was quite good, though. I didn't think it was a weakness. It was a bit variable, I have to confess. There were some bits that didn't look as good as other bits, but I thought even the bits that were least good still looked good. That was my view. And Gaz, I absolutely think a film themed around the Lich King would have done better. I certainly agree that they made a mistake in doing the orcs versus humans bit, because apart from the fact that people would inevitably draw comparisons with Wrath of the Lich King because of orcs, there's also the problem there's too many characters, because that was another criticism. There were too many characters, and if I had a criticism of it in terms of that, my issue was that Anduin Lothar was called Lothar basically most of the way through the film, and there was one point where Lane called him Anduin, as he would, because that's what friends would call each other. And I thought to myself, would someone who doesn't know about Warcraft get that? Would they know what Anduin even meant? They might even think that's his title, because it's not an obvious name. So he should have been introduced as, and it's just little things like that. He should have at some point in the film been introduced as Anduin Lothar, so that you knew, that was his name. CGI, I don't know, though, that it is always a factor. I think the problem is that what films use a lot of CGI, it tends to be fantasy films. Fantasy films don't always do brilliantly. And that's... So I think sometimes it's got to do with that. Netflix is doing a sequel cop movie. Oh, yeah, I saw that Will Smith thing. Well, I haven't seen the actual thing, but I'd noticed they were doing one. Watched the film once in the cinema and once a couple of months later, just no interest in it. Well, there were people that didn't like it, that were Warcraft fans. There were people who weren't Warcraft fans and did like it. But just on balance, I mean, the issue was it just didn't generate any buzz. You know, those sort of people that will wait to see what the reaction to a film is before going to see it in the second or third week. Those sort of people didn't go. That's ultimately what stuffed it. If they had, then it would have made a profit. There's a very good chance there would have been a sequel made. As it is, it made a loss. What sort of studio executive is going to, unless they've got a really deep desire to make it, and bear in mind it was Duncan Jones who had the real desire to make it. He was the driving force behind it, and he hasn't got the money to fund the film. So ultimately, a studio executive would have to be stark raving mad to authorise another one. Because if anything, the next one might do even worse. Just because of, you know... I mean, for a sequel to have any chance at all, surely it's got to be based on a really good first film. Even sequels that do better than the first film was always well received, I think. I think I'm right. I'm not a movie expert, but I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that. I don't think you get very many instances, if any, of a bad film, a film losing money, and then having a sequel made, and suddenly that sequel's really good. DiCaprio as Arthas. I'm not sure I see that one. Tyrion wouldn't really feature in the Arthas story to begin with. Like if they did the Warcraft 3 Frozen Throne bit. Your friend's biggest gripe with the movie was the lack of rep grind. Very good. I mean, I'll tell you another thing. There were some scenes that were never put in that I thought made it better. And it wasn't like it was an overly long film either. They easily could have kept those in. And I don't know why they didn't. There were some good scenes in there that actually I think would have helped the story. It's a bit like Suicide Squad. See, that's a film that I quite like and a lot of people dump on. But the DVD release with extra scenes in it, I think makes it a lot better than the cinema cut. The cinema cut had loads of stuff missing out of it and it didn't make a lot of sense. I mean, there was still stuff that didn't make sense. But, you know, it's a superhero movie. No one cares. But, you know, I think there's sometimes a few films. That's why I thought it was a bit strange, because I was saying about The Last Jedi when I watched that. I didn't like that at all. Not at all. And I was talking about in my review the fact that I was a bit apprehensive when I went to see it. And someone said in the comments, which was a natural enough thing to say, that it's probably because I was expecting it to be bad that I thought it was bad. And it's not. Because I've expected films to be bad in the past and actually loved them. I don't, you know... I don't think films for me are ever self-fulfilling prophecy. Sometimes I look forward to a film and I'm disappointed. Sometimes I think I'm not going to like a film. And it's... In fact, I think the best example of that was Meet Joe Black. I had to go and watch Meet Joe Black by my partner at the time. And I thought, oh, God, chick flick. Bloody hell. Christ, you know. And it was an awesome film. And I went and bought it on DVD when it came out on DVD. So, you know, I am prepared to go in thinking a film's going to be bad and be amazed by it. They need to put the Breaking Frostmourne part in just for the game audience. Oh, well, you mean doing the full story? I don't know. I mean, they could have done, I suppose, the full movie. It would have been better in 2 parts. Results of the Warcraft movie, the only compromise now is TV series like Game of Thrones. I don't think a TV series like Game of Thrones would work. I think a TV series more like Star Wars Clone Wars, where it's animated, would work. I'd be, totally up for an animated Warcraft series. I've actually just started watching the Clone Wars again. I keep forget every time I watch it. I sort of watched it the first time because it was made out to be canon, so I thought I really ought to keep up with it. But there's just, it's so badly written. There's and there are things in it that, you know, you have to keep yourself abreast of if you want to keep up with the story in Star Wars. But there are so many holes in the plots. Well, that's what I've been rewatching. I've got them on like Blu-ray, so I watched them. I got them. When did I get them? A while ago now, but I'm watching them again now. Like just when I come home, watching a few episodes at a time when I met Matty. But yeah, so I could see that if they wanted to do that, that would be okay. But I've never heard any suggestions that that would be a thing. But that would be fine. I would certainly watch that. They'd have to decide though on their definitive version of certain events, though, wouldn't they? With the times they've retconned everything. Last Jedi, and you're interested in anything Star Wars related. Do you know what's the best thing though? What I would advise, because for me there's two types of Star Wars stories. There's the ones based around the time of the films, the sort of Skywalker saga as I call it, although technically now that's come to an end, there's no more Skywalkers left. And then there's the old Republic stuff. I don't just mean to do with the game, like, you know, the old stuff. I would definitely recommend like reading books on those things because they're really good. Like I'm rereading the Bane series at the moment as well. It's actually quite ironic after watching the Star Wars film, as much as I disliked it, it's made me want to rewatch and read other Star Wars stories. I suppose to remind myself that there's very good things in the Star Wars. The Star Wars universe is actually huge when I think about it. It's absolutely massive. It might even be bigger than Tolkien's. I mean, it's had more people working on it. There might actually be more lore in Star Wars than there is in like Tolkien, and certainly more than in Warcraft. You know, Warcraft is very little compared. I haven't read the Rogue Squadron book series. I tend to be more interested in Sith-based stuff. So, hence the Darth Bane stuff. You know, and I like anything to do with the original Sith Lords, like Tulok Hord and Naga Sadow and Vitiate and stuff like that. So, because that's the thing for me. Star Wars is this bit of a fusion between fantasy and science fiction. It's the fantasy aspects of it that I like. As Arthur's story with the point of view of Jaina, Horde's story with the point of view of Thrall and Medivh. Jaina wouldn't appear, well, yeah. Yes, I suppose that could work. Then you'd have to put Thrall in it, and there would still be orcs in it then, though, wouldn't there? I think what they'd have been better off is writing it from the point of view of there not being any orcs in it. Which you could do. You could actually manage that. You could separate out the Horde story from it. Yeah, but again, I don't understand why people put so much store in who's directing it. Unless films are very different now than they should be. The director doesn't write the thing. Or they shouldn't be anyway. They just shoot it. You know. So I don't understand this influence. I know obviously sometimes the director is the same as the author. But it should never be a thing. I'm a big fan that should never ever be a thing. The director, the actors should act, the director should direct, producers produce, and authors write the bloody thing. Director had a ton of influence over episode 8. I mean, that's the thing that baffles me these days, the fact that directors do have that. I mean, if it happens to be a director who also wrote the piece, then that's inevitable. You just have to hope they're really good. Like Duncan Jones obviously sort of wrote, co-wrote at least, and directed Warcraft. You know, Ridley Scott is famous for having written or co-written a number of things that he's directed. Peter Jackson with Lord of the Rings, that sort of thing. Okay, but by and large, the directors should just shoot the bloody thing. Decide how to make it look good, and that's it. The editor can make sure it makes sense. The writer can make sure that the storyline makes sense. So yeah, I wouldn't give a director any influence over the storyline at all if I was in charge of it. It's not. I mean, JJ helped write episode 7. It's not even like episode 7 was stunning. I just thought, for me, I thought it was quite good. A lot of the reason I thought it was quite good is because it was a bloody relief that it wasn't a Phantom Menace, quite frankly. Because, so I thought, oh yeah, this is actually all right. This is a Star Wars film. Yes, fine. Even though, even episode 7 was a bit weird. Because it just seemed weird to me that you would have someone completely untrained in the Force who wasn't even using the Force in any obvious way until recently. And all of a sudden she learns how to fight with a lightsaber, how to pull a lightsaber to her, and how to, you know, persuade someone using Force persuasion without even knowing that these are things. She didn't know Jedi can influence the mind of others. She just decided to do it. So it's not like 7 was great. It was just a lot better. Don't get these people coming out of the woodwork now saying that this breathed new life into Star Wars. No, it didn't at all. They're just saying that to hype it up. Star Wars, as I say, Star Wars stories have been more productive when there haven't been films around. So after Return of the Jedi finished, there was a massive explosion in official, and you know, because Lucasfilm, even some of the books, was still overseen by George Lucas. That is why virtually everything that exists in the Star Wars universe is considered canon. Not all of it, but the vast majority is, because it was directly overseen by Lucasfilm or LucasArts. Aren't Star Wars purists still mad about everything except 4 to 6? Well, I am. I don't know about Star Wars purists in general. I'm pretty mad about everything apart from 4 to 6, I have to say. And the thing is, I don't even think 4 to 6 were brilliantly written. They were decent. What I like is the expanded stuff. The stuff that was written by actual authors who knew what they were doing. You know, that's the stuff that's good for me. You know, the thing is, when it comes to the films, and when it comes to even the animated series, like the Clone Wars and Rebels, there's so many holes in it. There's so many moments where you keep going, hang on, that doesn't make sense. You know, like, I'll tell you one thing that keeps annoying me, because, again, with Clone Wars, you know those droid destroyers with the shield generators? In Clone Wars, almost every time they come into view, all Anakin or Obi-Wan or anyone else that comes across them does is force push, knocks them into a load of other droids and destroys the whole lot. And yet in the very first bit of A Phantom Menace, 2 of them come up against 2 master... Well, not master... Obi-Wan was still a Padawan, but a master Jedi and a powerful Padawan. And it's a standoff, apparently. Why didn't they just force push them? So inconsistent. Does my head in. So yes, I'm mad about everything apart from 4 to 6. But not the books. The books are well written. The books are good. I know I haven't actually read any graphic novels or comics or anything like that. I know there's a load of stuff in there as well. Yeah. Do I think leveling with RAF is going to be as fast as before with the new patch? I can't imagine it will be. You know, I can't see how it will be. I think leveling just across the board. I suppose, again, depending on how you do it. I suppose if you're someone who just does quests, then it might be okay. It might be just about the same. I won't know until I really try it myself. But it doesn't sound like that it's going to be any quicker to level with anything, whether it's with Recruit a Friend or anything else, or heirlooms or whatever, which is a bit, disappointing. I think they did. What do they say about XP? I've got it written down somewhere. I know the XP has changed. Can't remember how much. The health of stuff has been increased, because for me it's not just about the XP, it's the overall, it's time taken is what I focus on. How long does it take to level? I don't care if it takes me 10 times as long to kill a mob if I get 10 times as much XP from it, but I don't. So I will care that they've increased the health of stuff. But I'm pretty sure they have adjusted XP, or balanced it, should we say. It might be that they've increased it for some things, I think some people were saying, and reduced it for others. But they have changed the XP for things. But I can't remember. But the health of everything has been increased, but some things a lot. A lot. And I don't even... I mean, I give up with it. It was a great opportunity to make it a nice experience for new players, and I just don't think they've done that. Well, yeah, heirlooms. The thing is, though, although heirlooms makes it faster, that's fine for you and I. New players don't get heirlooms. The leveling for me... my main focus is I keep imagining what's this like for a new player. For me, I will level up a character if I don't intend to do anything profession-wise on it. And I suppose with a new character I wouldn't, because I've got all the professions covered on characters already. I will just pay for a character boost if I can't be doing with the leveling. I don't care. But a new player's not going to go splashing out loads of money when they're not even sure they like the game. And also it wouldn't be sensible for a new player to do that, because they need the leveling to teach them about the world and to teach them about how to play that class. I don't need that. So, I'm okay with leveling super quick. In fact, with the click of a button that says I pay for a character boost is fine for me. But for a new player, you need enough time to learn how to play the game. But you have to be realistic about how much you can learn while doing leveling content anyway. A lot of what you'll need to learn, you'll do at endgame. And so... You need it to not take a silly amount of time. On a casual basis, maybe taking a month to get to level cap is okay. If you're playing it for several hours every night, and most of the weekend, then I would say probably a couple of weeks. I don't really see the benefit in it taking longer than that. Reports on PTR said that XP in some zones didn't get you to the next zone without doing dungeons. That shouldn't be the case. Yeah, I would assume that has been fixed. Yes, I agree. Because that really shouldn't be the case. Do you think we're just spoiled, though, considering how grindy leveling was in vanilla? No, because the thing is, back in vanilla, MMOs were supposed to be grindy. People knew what they were getting into now. These days, you've got to remember, MMOs are on a bit of a decline, and it could be argued that one of the reasons MMOs have declined since then is because of the grindy nature of it. People want the end game stuff. They don't want all the leveling stuff. So it depends where you've come from. So if you came from like Dungeons and Dragons type stuff, obviously you're always leveling. You never reach level cap. So that sort of attitude fed into the sort of people who played MMOs in the early days, and perhaps World of Warcraft was right at the end of those early days. But nowadays, there is a level cap, and people want to get to it, and then they know that the real game, for most people anyway, I keep getting moaned at when I say this, but still, most people are looking forward to the end game stuff. Whenever Blizzard are advertising what's coming up in the game, it's end game stuff they're advertising. They're not advertising stuff that, you know, leveling characters can do as well. They're advertising stuff specifically for end game. They're talking about new dungeons being released. They don't talk about a new level 30 dungeon coming out. No, new level 110. And the same with raids, and the same with every piece of content. It's very much designed for people who are at level cap. No, they aren't buffing mob damage. I talked about this a bit earlier. I thought they should. With that, I didn't think they should buff health. I'd have rather they buff damage to make it a bit more dangerous pulling multiple mobs. Do I think they'll buff mob damage percentage-wise in the pre-patch for BFA? If they've not taken the opportunity to do it now, I don't think so. Because for my mind, the only problem, like when people keep talking about, oh, leveling, it's too easy because you kill mobs too quickly. That's not what makes it too easy for me. What makes it too easy is when I was leveling in vanilla, the classic example I always give, because I remember this particular quest, but there are quests like this all over the place. Excuse me. So just behind Darkshire, there was basically a quest where we had to kill Worgen, and some of them would be patrolling in 1s and 2s. Some of them would be in camps. There'd be like 5 or 6 of them. Now, if you joined with someone in a group, you could take on the group of 5 or 6 and get the quest done more quickly because you had to kill a number of them. But if you're on your own, then you couldn't go into them because you would get killed. So you had to pick off the 1s and 2s in a patrol, pull them to a safe space so you didn't intersect with another patrol, kill them, and then wait for another, you know, patrol to come along and stuff like that. And that was caused by the fact that you've got that the mobs did too much damage for you to just wade in. Well, now they don't. That's what makes it too easy. The fact you can just rush in. Because increasing their health, all that actually does is makes it take longer. It doesn't actually put you in more danger or make it more difficult to do. You're still going to use the same abilities as if they had next to no health. You're just going to have to cast those abilities more often, that's all. So yeah, they should have increased the mob damage, not the mob health, in my opinion. How does it make it more dangerous? Yeah, but the mobs don't do very much damage to you. This is why people are able to go into a group of them. That's the whole point. They don't actually do enough damage to you. They can be hitting on you for a good long time before you're actually in any danger. And then you just take a health pot. Because, you know, you don't even have to craft those. You find those on mobs. Even in from early zones. Early days. A group of mobs when I'm leveling with this new system will hold no fear for me at all. Interesting to see what the smart AI NPCs will be doing in BFA. Well, from how they described it, it didn't sound very smart to me. What it sounded like to me was, instead of being predictable, I grant you it makes it unpredictable. That's not the same thing as smart. Smart would be that they make a sensible decision based on what you're doing. What this sounds like to me is it's the Dungeons and Dragons style response by a mob. In other words, instead of being a couple of predictable abilities they have, there's a whole range of things they can do, and it's random number generators to what they do. That way, from your point of view, it will seem more difficult because they'll do something you're not expecting, but it won't actually be doing something tactical. Now the rogue, I think the rogue will be fine. Because there's going to be a group of you. You can only stuff over one person at a time. I think as most things in vanilla, I mean, I was a paladin. You were pretty good at soloing stuff, but you still wouldn't run into a whole group of mobs. You know, you would die. I mean, the only advantage of being a paladin, it meant you could stun, bubble, and run. I mean, if it was just one of them, you'd stun and run. You know, Hammer of Justice, run away. And if there was a group of them, yes, you'd have to bubble. Back in the days when, if you depend on what level you were, you could use both bubbles one after the other because they didn't cause forbearance. I suspect Sneaky Pete's going to get a smack in the face of my hammer. Actually, I don't think I'm going to be worried about him. I might lose Will of the Ashbringer, but I'll still have the human racial that breaks the stun, won't I? Unless they get rid of that. Well, you can get out of saps as a paladin. If you need to. Then beat him up. Wow, Hobbs' way of pulling things. What's that? With BFA, do you think Blizzard chose parts of tier armor to be linked to the Azeroth medallion and not rings and trinkets? After all, the big problem with Titan Forging is with rings and trinkets overall. Right, well, the Arcana Crystal is a freak event, which they will hopefully not repeat. I don't know what went into that. Obviously, this idea of not having tier pieces meant that it made sense to use armor pieces for the Azeroth armor. But I don't know at all what went into their thinking process on it, because at BlizzCon no one even asked them, apparently, or one person did, but it wasn't widely reported, about the tier thing. That's why I remember it was being a bit freakish, because someone did, but it wasn't widely reported. Then someone told me that they'd said there'd be no tier in BFA, which made sense. And then I did a video on it. And then a few days later, ironically, it did start to surface, and then everyone else did videos on them. Hi, Teldranon. Yes, I'm doing quite well, thank you. Hopefully we get to keep the Ashbringer trait that breaks out of stun every few minutes. No, I don't care about that one. I want to keep Wake of Ashes. We're not going to get to keep all of our artifact abilities. We may not get to keep any of them. You know, there's no guarantee we'll keep any of them. But we're certainly not going to get to keep all of them. So I'd rather have the big one. You're going to try and plug a plus 20. I was fortunate I managed to get my key done on Saturday. By sheer fluke. You'd be shocked if we don't get Wake of Ashes, so would I, but it's not impossible. Yes, it is quite core to the playstyle. But Blizzard may disagree. I mean, it's not used as much, arguably, now with Tier 21, but that's due to the nature of how we are. You know, again, if you take away the Ashbringer and you know, other Legion bits and pieces, then yes, it becomes much more core. Well, the BlizzCon, yeah, putting it into the talent tree at BlizzCon was really just because they were taking our Ashbringer or artifact weapons in general away from us. So they had to put it in somewhere. But the fact that they decided to put it in as a talent and not just bake it in does... I mean, it could be a suggestion that that's what they're thinking. But as I say, what they're thinking of doing at the moment will bear no resemblance to what actually launches with BFA. You know, because apart from anything else, I will be moaning like hell if Wake... Well, I'll wait to see what everything else is. You can't really judge one ability in isolation. And I'd like to be able to try it out. I mean, that's why I'd really like to get into the beta itself. But that may not happen. So I can't really talk about that. Crusade would indeed be a 20-second thing. I mean, Crusade may not be in the game and they might get rid of it. But if they, you know, just having Crusade only last 20 seconds would stop it becoming the all-powerful talent that it is at the moment. I mean, it's baffling to me why they ever... Because it was quite obvious before launch that the Wrath of the Ashbringer trait, the thing that extends Crusade, was one of the key problems of it. It was maddening to me that they kept it in. Just like it was pretty obvious that Execution Sentence's problem was that there were too many abilities buffing Templar's Verdict. Well, you know, that should have been a bit of a wake-up call to change that as well. But they didn't. No, Holy Wrath is definitely going. Holy Wrath is gone. It's finished. Forget it. That is definitely going. The Ashbringer traits, I don't believe will be... No, some of them will just disappear completely. Same with everyone else's artifact, all the classes and specs. Most of those abilities you get from your artifact will just be instant. They will just disappear. So, you know, it's almost a bit like pruning without the pruning, isn't it? So the last two expansions, we've had quite a lot of abilities pruned. This time round, we might not get... We might have the odd talent prune. We're probably not going to get a lot of actual core abilities pruned. But by virtue of the fact that we'll be losing our artifacts abilities, means we'll be losing a good half a dozen extra abilities. All be them mostly passive, but still. And I'm not counting, of course, ones that just buff an ability by a certain percentage. I mean ones that actually do something that will disappear. So Divine Storm won't heal anymore. We won't get to break ourselves out of stuns passively. You know, our judgment won't automatically spread around if we carry on hitting things. All those things at all. I don't think we can blame Celestalon for Holy Wrath directly, although he is partially responsible because he was a senior developer in that team and he did defend it. Although that could possibly just because he was a bit of a toady, because really the former director of World of Warcraft was defending it and Celestalon was probably just like kissing his ass or something. But at the same time, yeah, it could be his fault. It's certainly partially his fault. Oh, sorry, links can't be posted here. You could DM it to me. That would work. A lot of the passive return in the new system. No, well, I mean, it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen. But I doubt it very much. I think they're just going to disappear. The ones that are just there, and I mean, ones that are a core part of the playstyle, I think, should be baked in. But I mean, there's players of some classes and specs that tell me that none of their abilities are really all that core, so they can just lose them completely. Ah, yes, the Divine Storm moving forward. I don't think it would be a good talent, though. I really don't think that would be a good talent. A better talent would be a Consecration that moves around with you. A bit like getting the protection glyph for it in the past expansion. But I don't think Tempest Storm, or Divine Tempest, sorry. Can't remember the name of the thing now. I don't think that would make a good talent. They might base Azeroth traits on the artifact traits. That's a possibility. But that wouldn't necessarily mean they end up being the best ones, though. In fact, it would be quite disappointing if they were the best ones, because that would seem a bit unoriginal. We might as well have just kept the artifacts. Divine... oh, God. Divine Tempest. I keep forgetting the name of it now. Don't know why. Absolutely changes gameplay, yes. It's a big change to the way you'd use Divine Storm. But, you know, if it changes back, it changes back. Well, I mean, you'll just have to wait and see. The thing is, though, what will happen is, I mean, I've no doubt that beta's got to open up sometime soon. Quite soon. I'd be very surprised if by the end of the month it's still not out. But even then, remember, class design is the last thing they do. So all we'll actually see of class design is their initial ideas. So then, if it goes anything like past expansions, you'll probably start to see a series of rapid changes, hopefully based on feedback, but not always. Which is why it's quite important. Divine Storm didn't always heal now. It did heal, I think, when it first came in Wrath, I seem to recall. I can't remember how long it lasted. It didn't heal in Wood. But, and nor, I don't think, I'm pretty sure it didn't in Mop either. I can't remember that Cataclysm. Oh yeah, Retribution passive. Well, that should disappear. I will be making very, like, I don't care whether I'm in the beta. Well, I do care whether I'm in the beta or not. But whether I'm in the beta or not, I will be making a lot of very loud noises. The problem is, I'm limited in how loud my voice can be. Because if I'm not in the beta, that means I won't have access to the forums. So I don't get to post anything. It's disappointing. I'll just have to try and persuade other people to post stuff. But yeah, I want the Retribution passive removing. There were several failed experiments. It's like Greater Blessing of Might was such an obvious failure that I mean, it lasted till launch, but they did get rid of it. But they still should never have got to launch. Holy Wrath was another failure that they've just allowed to slowly starve to death. So that'll be going. And then finally, Retribution passive is the one that is such a disaster, and yet I am still not sure they're going to get rid of it. They don't even have to get rid of it, just get rid of the damage portion of it. If they want to keep in the 30% damage reduction, fine. No, I'm not going to complain about that, and no one games that for the purposes of logs or anything, so that's okay. I mean, let me just show you. Actually, the comments probably disappeared now, but I mean, I know people are joking when they say this, but the fact that you can even joke about this is ridiculous. So someone was saying, oh, good tip for Anturan High Command. When you see people in your raid on low health, step on a mine. That way you kill them and you get some retribution damage. So, you know, obviously I hope they're joking. But the fact that you could even do that is actually something you could do. If you were a bit of an arsehole, you could do that. You know, see someone on low health. Oh, step on a man. Oh, sorry, that was me. Oh, I don't know what I was doing. Oh, you're dead. That's a shame. I've got wings ready. Oh, how handy. Why gnomes can't be paladins? Well, there are multiple reasons. But we'll go with Ian Hazakostas because he's the game director. He basically said that the reason they don't make sense is because paladins are very disciplined. Okay. You know, guardians of the light, blah, blah, blah. Very serious fellows. And gnomes are not. Okay. So, you know, it's really as simple as that. Now, I have a number of reasons why they shouldn't be paladins. But the official reason is because they lack discipline. Right from the horse's mouth. Oh, you switch from Shadow Priest to Ret for Gul'dan. Well, I think Ret is very good in Mythic Plus. You know, it's... I don't think it has any issues at all. They can't be disciplined. No. Gnomes have no discipline. That's why they keep exploding things. It's why they can't even retake Numragon, which is run by Trogs. I don't know why they can be priests, but priests are not always the most disciplined of people either. Case in point, in Cataclysm, I've forgotten his name now, the bishop fella from Stormwind Cathedral is not there anymore. He turns traitor because he lacks discipline. He's, you know, he gets taken in by the old god's whisperings and joins the Twilight's Hammer. You don't see paladins turning traitor. They don't go bad. There is a specialisation called discipline, but, you know, without trying to get too political, you put the biggest lie in the name. It's a bit like calling something the Democratic Republic, the People's Democratic Republic of Korea for North Korea, when it is neither anything to do with the people, it's not a republic, and it's not a democracy. Okay? You put the biggest lies in the name and tell people this is the thing. So priests go, or discipline, I'm called a discipline priest, therefore I must have discipline. No, it's just a lie. You just keep repeating it. Oh, well, that's... No, Teldron, right, okay. So here's the thing. I've seen this. So you've said, in my raid, that's not a joke at all. I'll priest griff the low-life guy out of the shield. That's what gnome priests do. I stopped playing WoW after the first tier of Wrath. Okay? And I came back a bit casually a bit later on. But that was just casual. And then I came back properly to raid again at the end of Cataclysm. I didn't even know gnome priests were a thing, so I came back late Cataclysm. So I joined a raiding guild, doing Dragon, just to start Dragon Soul. I was doing Dragon Soul. Arthas was a paladin, yeah. Yeah, alright, okay. There's been one dodgy one. Everyone's got to have a black sheep. I'd forgotten about him. So I came back to find a gnome priest, which was bad enough. That was traumatic enough. But this bastard used to grip me into shit as well. You know, or what he used to do on that fight in Dragon Soul, I can't remember the name of it now, but with the big lobster thing, and you had to run off killing tentacles. I'd be running to my next tentacle. I'm a paladin. I mean, even then I wasn't fast. And he kept gripping me back like a wanker, trying to get me killed. So, you know, this is absolutely what gnome priests... Gnomes don't become priests to help people, to heal people. They come to be arseholes. They're insidious. They're nasty, nasty creatures. Tyrant Velhari is an Eredar, though. So they were corrupted by Sargeras. It wasn't like a deliberate decision. They were just lied to. They were corrupted by Sargeras. They're a different thing. Manari are a different thing. So Eredar get a free pass on that. Arthas, fair enough. He went a bit doolally all of his own accord. You're a Horde Tauren Paladin. What? Oh, Goblin Priest. Oh, well. It's the sort of thing gnome priests do, though. I have seen it. And there's a gnome priest in my guild, which I'm not very happy about. Absolutely, yeah. If you're going to be a Horde Paladin, there is only Blood Elf. That's the only choice. I mean, if they did make Zandalari Trolls Paladins, then there might be a choice as well. Arthas is a hero character indeed, but he is still, storyline-wise, he still was a Paladin. You know, so... But the other Paladins were fine. And even when they did become corrupted, sort of, it was by trying to do good. No such thing as Horde Paladin. Well, yeah. Yeah. Although, I know, you know, obviously, yeah, the Blood Elf ones, the Blood Knights, they're... I think even that, I think it's been subtle. But I do think... there has been a little bit of a change, because as I understand it, and I could be wrong on this, So the original concept of these Blood Knights was, instead of serving the light, they basically forced the light to do their bidding. You know, it was an aggressive thing. And then I think over time, their attitude to the light is supposed to have changed. Now, I can't be certain of that, but that's the impression I've got, that Liadrin, who is leader of them, has basically come to respect more traditional Paladin views over time. But I don't know about that. Anduin, is he a priest or Paladin? Well, they said he's a priest, so he has to be a priest. Even though he uses Paladin abilities. But if Blizzard say he's a priest, they are the ones who get to decide what they are. Then, you know, should we just say it's a little bit inconsistent? And again, I don't want anyone in the comments when they watch this on YouTube saying, oh, they explained that he's a hero and that's different. No, cobblers, it's not different. That's just using a word to, that's not explaining anything. If they want to explain it, they can explain to me why he uses a sword, and he doesn't just carry around a sword, you know, like a mage might, and not actually use it. He uses it to hit people. The sword was formerly belonging to a warrior, and in the cinematic, he uses Crusader strikes and Templar's verdict, right? If he's not a paladin, he's got no business using those. And he wears plate. He is wearing plate. And he's wearing a helmet as well, which is also plate. Admittedly, it comes off a bit easy. Doesn't quite fit him. So on the beta thing, your guild usually gets in pretty early with your raid ranking. Well, yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, well, thank you very much, yeah. So, yeah, if we get someone in. I mean, I've got no chance of getting in on the strength of my raid progress. The only chance I have of getting in is on the strength of, like, doing ret stuff. But that's not very likely because it's not very widespread. So I am effectively, unless, of course, Blizzard asks Sol Sacra, you know, for names of people that should get in, and he puts mine forward, and there's plenty of candidates, then I have basically got no chance of getting in early. But we shall see. But at least if there is someone who's able to post stuff, then that will be better than nothing. Well, he uses what might, to some, appear to be power word barrier, but it's not really power word barrier, is it? Because power word barrier is there to protect people from damage. The thing he uses is clearly healing and rezzing people. That's the point of it. Those Stormwind Guard and people have fallen. All right, they might not be dead, but they're badly injured. He's using it to raise them back up. Now, that's a Paladin ability. All right, it's not a Ret Paladin ability, but still a Paladin ability. Yeah, but who's doing the healing? The thing itself was clearly doing the healing. So, you know, it just looks like a barrier. I don't think it, you know, there's no proof that it was. Oh, well, there you go. It does that. Well, there you go. So anyway, it heals. So it's all so we should put it this way. He's a priest who uses paladin abilities. I mean, to be fair, he can't just become a paladin because he uses paladin abilities. A paladin is not like a mage. You have to, you know, it's an order of knights. So he would have to be accepted into the Silver Hand as a human, at any rate, to become a paladin. But I don't think the leaders of the Silver Hand, I wouldn't have any objection. Be nice to have the King of Stormwind under my command. As apparently I am supposed to be the leader of the Paladins, so the game tells me. How much longer am I on for? Technically minus 13 minutes. Basically until people stop talking. The next time someone stops saying something, then that's it. Who is to say that artifact traits aren't baseline in Battle for Azeroth? Well, no one. I just would find it remarkable if they just baked everything in. I would quite like them to bake some things in. I wouldn't be opposed to some things being talents, although I'm not a big fan of that, because I don't see any of them as being strong enough for that. But it would just seem strange. I think the argument would be, oh, thank you, Sergey. If Sergey is actually here at the moment, or is that just a separate thing? It would actually be remarkable because we're supposed to be like getting rid of our artifact weapons. So what would be the point to do? We're not losing any power if we effectively get to keep all the abilities. So I don't think it would make sense. But nothing's been said until we see the state of BFA when the beta opens, or alpha, whatever they're calling it. Then we won't really know what their thinking is even. Oh, going back to Anduin, yes, he did have to unequip his sword. Well, he didn't have to unequip his sword to cast it. He just did. You know, that's just him being a bit, you know. I'm not young at all. Do I think there's ever an argument for Blizzard to go back to the old talent system now that artifacts are going away? No, I think MMOs, I think in general, have moved away from that system. I don't think it's just that in WoW they decided to move away from it. I think just gaming in general is moved away. I mean, I agree that the original talent system wasn't a great system. It's just that the current system, I think the problem with the current system is that it doesn't do what their original intentions were. So because their intentions have changed, they should probably rethink the talent system in general. But I wouldn't necessarily just change it back to the old system either. Do you know what I quite like in terms of talents? So I've been playing Star Wars The Old Republic again a bit recently. And what they have with their talent system is, so they've got different tiers of talents. I mean, like we have, but you don't have to pick one from each. So you've got like different levels. Like, I can't remember what they're called, but call it level 1, level 2, level 3. There might be a 4th level, I can't remember. Let's say there is. So the first talent point you get to pick at a certain level, you have to pick one from the top tier. And then the next 2 as well. So the first 3 talents have to be picked from that top tier. Then the 4th one, you can pick from either the top tier or the second tier. And then the next 3 are like that. And then the 7th one can be picked from either the 1st, the 2nd or the 3rd. So it works like that. So it's not like having to pick one from 3, you know, but you're limited in how many of the very bottom one you can pick, but you're not limited in how many of the top one you can pick. So you can put the relatively weaker ones up there. So you could have more of those if you wanted. That sort of system I quite like. I'm not saying they should definitely do that in WoW, but it is another interesting way to do it that gives you a bit more choice. But then it could be argued that the more choice you have, the reason why Blizzard moved away from it is because there's the more chance that someone will come up with some cunning combination of talents that is really overpowered for a particular situation. Like, I don't know whether everyone remembers, there was a period in Wrath, during the Nax tier, there was a mage, bloody gnome, would you believe it? But there was a mage who was basically able to solo bosses, all right? And that included doing the trash up to them as well, because of a particular combination of mage talents that allowed them to spell steal the bone arm, and then there was another talent that allowed them to do something else as well. So they were able to solo Nax while it was current. This was before Ulduar. What about all the Paladins in the Scarlet Crusade? They weren't Paladins. No. No, they weren't Paladins. I don't think any of them were Paladins, were they? Because there's only been so many Paladins, really. There's not actually been, like, hundreds of Paladins. Paladins specifically are specifically Knights of the Silver Hand. I mean, obviously there's now Draenei Paladins and Blood Elves and stuff like that. But in terms of the original Paladins on Azeroth, I'm not saying none of them definitely weren't. I mean, Tyrion's son, all right, he went a bit dodgy as well. But he may not have been an actual Paladin. I can't remember. Because that quest isn't there anymore. I can't redo that quest because, you know, well, it's not there anymore. But I'm not sure that they were all Paladins, though, Scarlet Crusade. But I can't remember. If I'm honest, I cannot remember. I don't... No, I don't encourage drinking games. It can be very bad. They might expand on the talent matrix that was attempted with artifacts. The problem with artifacts is that it wasn't really a talent system because you, within a few months, well, not even that, within about a month you had everything, didn't you? I can't remember how long it took to get all the traits for me, but surely it wasn't more than a month. What else have I missed? All right, yeah, I've done that. But I do think that it would make sense to revisit the whole idea of talents, you know, and think about other systems. Wasn't the mage just able to sell due to them stealing armor off the horse guys? I distinctly remember there were 2 talents that were key. So it wasn't, and spell steal was a baseline ability, so it wasn't just that. But the bone armor was crucial to it, certainly. But I can't. But there was a particular combination of talents in 2 different trees that allowed them to do something amazing, and I can't remember what it was. Because it was also it wasn't just enough to be able to have the bone armor and there was something else, but I forget what it was. Too long ago. Yeah, I certainly wasn't far ahead of the curve because I had to fit everything at work and do another character. But I can't remember how long it took me. But it wasn't that long. And after that, it was all a complete irrelevance. It was utterly irrelevant. So there was no choice at all. So I remember, I mean, I did a video very early on, like on the optimal path, or what I thought was the optimal path for the Ashbringer, and then that was it. There was no point in it after about a month. Something where a portion of absorbed will be converted to spell power. That may well have been at Sulfuric then. Because obviously something had to make them deal more damage with their spells as well to be able to kill these things in enough time. Apart from the fact you don't want your bone shield wearing off. But yeah, I mean, I think that's just, you know, is just the idea that when you have when you have a lot of possible combinations of talents, there's always the chance that a particular combination that Blizzard hadn't considered turns out to be game breaking. Whereas the current system, you could certainly argue, doesn't allow for that, because you've got limited combinations of things. And also you can also prevent the talents directly interacting with each other in that way as well. But, you know, although you'll sometimes have combinations of talents that work well with each other and therefore become cookie cutter, like Ret Paladins at the moment, certainly in the gear I am, there is no reason for me to change any of my talents. You know, so I just keep the same talents. For a single target raid boss, I'll have these talents. AoE raid boss, I'll have these talents. Mythic Plus, I'll have these talents. It's just the same all the time. The only difference will be moving between Divine Intervention and Crusade. Cavalier, sorry. For the extra speedy horsey. But I never need that. There isn't actually enough movement and Antaurus, and I keep dying. So, well, I don't keep dying, but I keep nearly dying. The argument against the old system was the choice was a trap. There was that as well, but I think I saw, well, I don't know. I saw the main problem being that there were game-breaking possibilities that they can control more directly with the current system. The current system isn't an improvement in terms of cookie-cutter builds at all. It's not. The only way it is an improvement at all is in that you can create a system whereby you would use different talents. But this is why it maddens me when you don't do this. But in theory, they could make it so that you would use different talents on a pure single target raid boss as compared to a raid boss with ads as compared to doing Mythic Pluses. You should really, if a talent system is going to do anything sensible, have 3 different profiles for those 3 different situations. And then there are other situations as well. Maybe there's some that are good for solo content and that sort of thing. But they don't do that. Or they certainly don't do that for my class. I can't speak for others. And as a result, it doesn't work. But the system should allow that. They don't need combination talents for it to be broken. Remember, yeah, surrender to madness. Yeah, I do. It was actually quite hilarious. Surrender to madness, because if the fight didn't go quite as they were hoping, then there was a good chance I would get a retribution proc. You know, so worked out quite well. Well, that is the problem. There is always going to be a best in a certain situation. Sometimes you get away with it, again, with talents if, let's say, just like Surrender to Madness, let's say a particular talent requires quite a high level of skill to get the best out of it. So sometimes, like, for example, when I'm creating a new character or leveling a new character, and I don't know how to play that character properly, I just go for mostly passive talents, because sometimes if you don't know what you're doing, you're better off with passive talents than an active talent that requires some skill to use. So sometimes there's an element of that, but for people who do know how to play the class, there should still be some choice of talents as well. Dead talents are a huge problem, in particular, I think, for like Paladins who don't have multiple specs for the same role. So we only have one DPS spec, so having a dead talent there is ruinous. Whereas with another, like with a rogue, you could argue, well, if your spec isn't good for that fight, then another one will be. I don't really care about dead talents in theory, because as long as there is a good talent available on that row, then that's fine. But the issue is, let's say I feel lacking on a particular fight, and I could really do with something to bring on that fight. Well, a talent might be an ideal way of doing that, and if I've got dead talents, well, there's definitely room for it. Is anyone in Europe downloaded the patch? Some people are, because I saw comments about it, and one of which got a blue response, which seemed to suggest that there was a thing. But I'm not, which I'm not happy about at all. So Shadow Priest will take Shadow Crass in Mythic Plus, but it feels more like we have to take that talent to fill a hole than is missing in our class. Oh, so yeah. Well, I don't know about Priests actually, but yeah. I certainly don't think that talents have been well thought. My experience is purely in terms of Paladins, because all the way through Alpha they were changing and chopping and changing them. They were either changing the talents, removing talents, adding talents in, sometimes just moving where they were so that different combinations became possible and others became impossible. And they were doing it so late on that it was clearly just what went live was just what they ended up with at the point where they had to make a decision, rather than it being finished. And I'm sure the same was true of other classes as well. We don't know that Wake of Ashes replacing Holy Wrath in BFA. We don't know that. It might. I'm not saying it won't, but we don't know that. And it won't happen if I've got anything to say on the matter. Oh, hi, McMatrix. I haven't seen you for a while. So you've been accepted for trial. They've done the first 2 bosses on Mythic. Yeah, I don't blame you for being slightly intimidated on maybe having to do the dogs when you didn't do the progress. I was in that situation. I didn't do the progress on dogs, and then I had to do it the following week or something. Which, yeah, I don't like the dogs. Because there are mistakes to be made on the dogs if you haven't done it before. And when people have progressed on it, they've obviously got to make their mistakes without anyone getting mad at them. But you just have to see how it goes. Dogs is a shit boss anyway. It drops rubbish loot. And I got the mount. First time I killed it, I got the mount off them. So I don't care about that either. What if they just remove the talent tree completely? Has to be some variation. There has to be something you can do to customize your character to particular encounters. The problem is that the current talents don't do that, but they should. They should just make them do that. They should just put more effort into making them do that. Off topic, why did I stop doing log reviews for people? Because, it's a good question, simply because whenever I got them, it was always the same mistakes with them. It was like always the same mistakes. So every log video would just look the same. I mean, I haven't had any for a while either. I haven't had any sent to me for a while. But yeah, what I was finding was they were just all the same. It's the same problem. So it's. I think the thing with dogs is it's just there are ways in which you can stuff it up for everyone. And if you're already nervous because 1, you're in a new guild, so you're trying to make a good impression. 2, you weren't there for progress. Excuse me. You know, I don't think dogs is a good fight for that. Yes, the logs were exclusively Ret Paladin. I would not presume to read the logs of any other spec in the game. I could identify super obvious things, you know, like let's say someone didn't pre-part or they used, you know, they were a shaman and they were clicking on heroism 10 seconds into the fight or something. But I wouldn't really presume to lecture anyone on any spec other than Ret. But yes, that was the issue I was having when I was looking at people's logs. It was like very frequently it was the same things. So it got a bit repetitive. Yes, he's in Battlecry. So there are some things I could probably see in a very bad... Like if someone came to me saying they had like, you know, 950 item level gear and they were doing 200k DPS, I could probably find a lot of things in their logs that would explain it because that, you know, they're doing like 1/10 of the damage they should be doing. But if it just comes to fine tuning, they're not doing quite the damage they should be doing, then, you know, I wouldn't be able to do that for anything else. Garothi is not at all bad. You know, Garothi is absolutely fine for melee. Especially if you've got plenty of ranged, because then you won't even have to move out of melee to do the soaking, except maybe at the end of the fight. My white attacks don't do they? I don't think they do that much. I'd be very surprised if my white attacks even did 10% of my damage, but I can't be. Let's have a quick, a sneaky look at some. There's some recent logs. Could soon sort this one out. Where's my recent boss? Varimathras, where I found out later I was using the wrong trinkets. I wasn't happy. It wasn't a good pull from me anyway. And then to be using the wrong trinkets. So yeah, my melee damage accounted for less than 3% of my total damage. So, you know, that is way below 200k DPS. The death of a titan. I can't remember. What does that mean? Oh, well, you will be able to kill Argus with LFR, when it becomes available. Doesn't it become available? Well, we've just had Coven, haven't we? So that's the penultimate wing. So when the next wing comes out, which presumably will be next week, then you will be able to. Now, we don't always use Wake of Ashes off cooldown now. There are certain higher priorities. Like, even Judgment can be a higher priority. But Blade of Wrath can be a higher priority now than Wake. It's really weird. World Forger's Flame? I suppose so. I've only just got that, though. Well, let's have a look then. Oh, no, that was a... Yeah. I don't have any of that on that log because I'd forgotten to equip that trinket because I'd been doing Mythic Pluses before it, so I unequipped it. And then I forgot to re-equip it. That was disappointing. All right, let's try and find another log then. Where was the last time I did use that? Let's see. Kingaroth, I suppose. Which is an even worse log, but never mind. Kill the boss. So just under 3 for that. So that would make a grand total of about less than 4.5%. So again, way less than 200k DPS. My sim DPS for single target is about 1.9 million. So about 5% of that would be a bit less than 100k DPS I'm doing with my, you know, supposedly my auto attacks. So I don't do that much. Of course, there is some movement on Kingaroth, but it's not that much. You don't spend much time out of melee range of something. Oh yeah, WoW Analyzer as well, of course. Absolutely, you know, DPS Analyzer is it will point out some things of interest. Yeah, maybe I should just fiddle it, shouldn't I? I should just pretend to be a guru on everything, get people to send logs in, put them through WoW Analyzer, note down everything and go, oh, you seem to be making these mistakes. Yes, I know everything. No, I know nothing about anyone else's spec. I think warriors do a fair amount of auto attack damage though, don't they? Argus and LFR, they're going to skip the ad phase. I don't know what they're going to do on LFR. I mean, they said in Tomb they like the idea of having one like mechanic that of consequence. So I don't think Soul Burst will be a mechanic of consequence. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if there was no such thing as Soul Burst. That will surely get the chop. I even wonder if the ads are going to be, you know, where they get the particular susceptibilities to different types of damage. I wonder if even that's going to be a thing. But I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be like on LFR. It will be interesting. They may well skip the ad phase altogether. Certainly, yeah. They could well do that. You got an orange Iminar pass with Toenail of Promise. All right. Wow. The there was someone in our guild, I think, on a fight on something that got a close rank 2, as in not far off rank 1, and they discovered they had something incorrect equipped. I can't remember what it might have been. Well, Trinket's the most obvious thing. They weren't happy about that. Well, I keep seeing people showing in just in the Ret Discord, people simming over 2 million DPS. And they've been doing that for ages. Sorry, I'm just typing something. Rhett's still using 4-piece tier 20. I bloody am, because I can't get enough tier 21. I would say at this point of Antorus should be in the position now to be able to move up to tier 21. 4-piece tier 21. I would be able to if I could only get Imonar to behave himself and give me some bloody legs. Maybe this week. I mean, looking at how long it took me to get me Pantheon trinket, I could be waiting a while still. It does certainly depend on the item level. But, you know, I mean, I'm ready to move on for it now. I know I'm going to, so I've made peace with that. As a tank, can you sim yourself? You can, but only for damage. You know, so you can still yourself for damage. And, of course, as a tank, I mean, an ideal tank, of course, will be able to do good damage as well as stay alive. But the staying alive is all important. Because sometimes you'll get a tank that will do loads of damage. The healers will complain they're taking too much damage. And they'll say, well, I'm alive, aren't I? And the argument could be made, yes, but that's because they're taking too much healing, which then takes healing away from others who might die. But a good tank will be able to do both. So, yeah, you can sim yourself for DPS as a tank. You just have to be careful that you don't just use it as an excuse to equip all your most damaging trinkets and other stuff and relics at the cost of being able to survive without having every healer on you. So your gear is well itemized for eye level. Yeah, mine's not great at all at the moment. And it all sort of hinges around these tier legs. I can do nothing without getting the tier legs. You're working on Mythic Argus without a Pantheon. Oh, that is bad luck, isn't it? I mean, I do now have it, so I can stop complaining. I was a little disappointed it wasn't Amon Thul's. But, you know, it wasn't. How much versatility do I have? I think, I can't remember now. It's about 15 or something. It might be a bit lower now, actually. I've changed something recently. I mean, what we want is we want enough haste to be all right, and then a crap load of mastery. Amonthul's, well, apparently it's quite a low drop rate. Yeah. No one in our guild has got it. But there's no shortage of people who keep PMing me with screenshots of themselves getting it. You know, so there's quite a high number of people who know me that have it and quite like, you know, sending me proof that they've got it. I seem to get at least a couple of them a week. And the thing is as well, the difference it would make to me is massive, because the actual epic trinket is not that great for paladins. It's really not great. It's single target only as well, the effect, so that's, you know, makes it less great. It's so much better to get Amonthul's, because that's just good in every situation and better in any. Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't expect many people to have it in any one guild. I mean, I don't think, as I say, no one in our guild's got it, unless a social or an alt's got it and no one's told. I think someone would have said if they'd have got it on any character there. Oh yeah, Gaz, I think you said, didn't you? Someone in your guild who turns up with no pots, food or flask does horrible DPS, but they've got Amonthul's. Well, Fate obviously decided that they'd saved enough puppies, and so they deserve it. But knowing my luck, I will get it just before like Battle for Azeroth comes out. That's usually how it goes for me. I get my BIS item just before the next expansion. I mean, it actually literally happened in Cataclysm, I remember. Farming Dragon Soul week after week after week in that content drought. And it wasn't until a couple of weeks before the expansion came out that I got the heroic Girthalak, which was the sword off the last boss, off Deathwing, which was like BIS, the BIS of BIS. I had the hero. In fact, it was so BIS that I wasn't even using other heroic weapons. I was using the normal Girthalak. One positive of BFA, you can farm dungeons repeatedly for BIS as the right gear at least. I don't see that as a positive. It puts me in mind of vanilla, where Paladins would want to run Blackrock Depths, an Emperor run no less, because that dropped our tier gloves. But although you would have plenty of Paladin takers for such a run, what you really needed was a mage to blow up all the guys where the torchbearers were. Not easy to find mages who wanted to do it, because they mostly didn't care about it. It didn't drop any of their dungeon tier. And I fear the same thing. What if our BIS piece is in a dungeon that people by and large don't like doing? Do I think Arcano Crystal will be BIS? No, Arcano Crystal cannot be BIS. Still going into BFA. At least not at level cap. No. That will... it will die. They will have learnt from that. I still don't understand why they haven't learnt from it still now. Because it just did my head in. When they said earlier on the expansion, when they admitted that it was over budget, and they said, but you know what? We thought about nerfing it, but you know what? At some point, the item level that you're going to be getting is going to be way below other stuff, and it'll not be as good. Because even with Titan Forge, the chances of you getting a Titan Forge one at very high level is very slim. It'll work itself out. But then they made it an available trinket from the vendors, which is like madness. So a baseline version of it now can be 910. I got a 910 one from the Veiled Argonite vendor, which is the lowest item level it could be if I was going to get it off that. Do I remember when Atish? I remember Atish. I wasn't in a guild that got it because we didn't finish Nax, but I remember obviously seeing people with it in like Alterac Valley and stuff, but I didn't actually raid with anyone who had it, so I don't specifically remember it being BIS in Karazhan. It doesn't surprise me. I mean, I did Karazhan with some vanilla gear still. I hadn't replaced all my vanilla gear when I was doing Karazhan. For some classes, 860 Arcana still seems better than 930. Wow. That's... but it is just madness. But, you know, at least, even though it's not a problem they're dealing with, at least they're going to... do I want to see a screenshot of a 985 socket avoidance Arcano? Not really, no. At least there's... you've got to hope there's not going to be a similar one in Battle for Azeroth. Because they know it was over budget. They know they shouldn't have done it. It's just they haven't done anything to fix it. But, you know, they will. I am actually going to have to call it in a few minutes because we have kept rambling on. But I am going to have to cut and shut this and get it uploaded, actually. And I've just noticed the time. We are going to run out of time for me to do that. So we'll see the remainder of that. Do I want to see inside of a casket? I'll see the inside of a casket soon enough. Arcano for Affliction Warlock is better than some trinkets 100 item levels high. Well, that's just grim. That's just a bit sad. It's a bit like, isn't it? Is it Guardian Druids that either had or maybe still have a particular trait that's so important and so, you know, that they can have a relic that's way behind an item level than they have access to, but you still equip it because it's BIS trait, because the trait is way more important than the item level. Something like that. All right, yeah. But anyway, I'm going to have to call it there. We've gone over 50 minutes. and it takes ages for me to sort this one out for YouTube as it is. And I've still got to do... Have I got even time to do WoW? I may not even have time to do WoW Flash tonight. I might have to do... Oh, I'm going to have to. Oh, no, I've got to. Damn it. Do I? That might actually have to come out on Thursday if I'm not careful. But anyway, I'm going to call it there. Thanks very much for coming on. It went on for a very long time. I shall see you next week or tomorrow when I'm streaming.